pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. First item is a public participation. Does anyone have any comment on anything on the agenda or want to say anything real quick? Not seeing anyone. I would like to notice that we had an executive. No, I didn't see anyone. Oh, I'm sorry.
I just have a one-paragraph thing to say. I know you have a very full agenda tonight. My name is Judy Strimmel. I live at 47 Luella Court. This is a copy of a letter that was sent to the HARB. As you know, the Board of Commissioners plan to meet on 2/13 for final approval on the 40 Luella Court Mansion Plan. It is the latest plan. In the latest plans, it shows that Mr. Holloway plans to enclose the west porches of the mansion. Should this not be reviewed by the HARB for comment and approval? Needless to say, the residents of Luella Court are fearful that there are other items in the plan that violate the Luella Court Historic District. We would like the HARB to attend Monday's meeting to articulate the, I can't read without my glasses, the comment that the plan should go back to HARB for review. As you are aware, the HARB never reviewed the building at all, as they were instructed that they could not, as it was only the garage in front of them. When do they review the building? Thank you.
Anyone else? I would like to give a notice of executive session preceding the Board of Commissioners meeting of January 23rd and February 13th, where personnel and legal matters were discussed. I'd like to have a motion for the approval of the minutes.
I move we approve the minutes.
Second.
January 23rd and January
23rd and January 30th.
Right.
Second.
Any commissioner comment? Public comment? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Passes 7-0. We'd like to have the consideration of the appointments for boards and commissions. Kevin?
I'd like to nominate to the Ethics Board Joanna Bell Merriman, Bud Hirsch, and Bill Conlon. To the Rental Housing Board, Joe Vogelay. I'm sorry if I mispronounced your name. To the Code Appeal Board, Brian Morrison. To the Park and Rec Board, Christopher Campbell. And then to the Civil Service Commission, we will appoint John Schultz, or nominate John as the appointee, and Enrique Hervada and Michael Falve as the alternates. So I'd like to make a motion to approve all of those folks.
Have a second?
Second.
Second. Any comment? Public comment? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
The ayes have it. Next, we'd like to have a certificate of appreciation of the Wayne Presbyterian Church. Elaine?
Tonight we are awarding a certificate of appreciation to the Wayne Presbyterian Church. This is in connection with the electric vehicle charging station project that we recently completed in partnership with Community Energy and a state grant. The spot is right next to the Wayne Senior Center. It's the big green spot, and we have one of the first in the region electric vehicle charging stations there. The spot is leased by the Township. It is actually owned by the Wayne Presbyterian Church. And tonight we would like to acknowledge our gratitude to the church for partnering with us and for supporting this effort. So we have with us Reverend Casey Thompson. And here is the certificate of appreciation. And it reads, whereas the Wayne Presbyterian Church has partnered with Radnor Township with a mutual goal of creating a greener approach to living in our community, with the placement of an electric car charging station in the Wayne Presbyterian lot, this electric charging station is the first of its kind in Radnor Township. Be it known that the Radnor Township Board of Commissioners commends the shared land partnership with Wayne Presbyterian Church and further acknowledges their role in improving the environment. So thank you very much for your support and your partnership and your involvement in the community. These are all for them? Okay. Thank you so much.
Next item is a certificate of appreciation to the Rotary Club of Wayne for their generous donation of these two Fuji Mountain Bikes. Chief, you want to come up? Sure, go ahead, Chief.
Just like to say that bicycles are invaluable to police work. Not only is it cost effective because it saves on fuel, it keeps our officers in shape, and it also is great for community relations as far as community policing. The officers are more maneuverable in certain neighborhoods. They can interact better with the community. And the bikes that we had were in dire shape, and the Wayne Rotary Club stepped up and donated these 2 beautiful bikes, fully equipped with lights, sirens, the whole 9 yards. So we can't thank them enough, and I know the president now will read the certificate.
Certificate of appreciation is presented to the Rotary Club of Wayne for their generous donation of 2 Fuji mountain bikes to the Radnor Police Department, as they will be utilized to supplement the Radnor Police Department while patrolling the community. These patrol bikes will directly benefit the citizens and visitors of Radnor Township. Be it known that the Radnor Township Board of Commissioners recognizes the community partnership with the Rotary Club of Wayne and their generous donation to better serve the township. Thank you. I would just like to make one other comment. In 1958, I represented St. Catherine's at the Rotary Leader of Tomorrow camp up in Downingtown, so you got me started. I appreciate it.
All right, thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Bill, thank you very much.
Thank you, guys.
Good seeing you.
Thank you. We'll see you Wednesday.
All right. Can we ride him around?
Paul Basek here. We have a recognition of Paul Basek in recognition of his outstanding service as interim Public Works Director. Our Public Works Director left the township, and in the interim till we appointed a new Public Works Director, Paul did a tremendous job. And Paul, on behalf of the Radnor Township Commissioners, I'm very happy to give you this recognition and thank you for your service. We also, Matt Ballman left as the Director of Community Development, and 2 gentlemen filled in admirably. We really appreciate it. Ray Daly, we'd like to recognize you for your outstanding service as Interim Chief Building Code Officials. And let me just say, the last 4 years we've been shorthanded in the department, and Ray and his staff has done a tremendous job. We really appreciate it. And the next one is Bill Mill, in recognition of his outstanding service as Interim Zoning Officer, making the tough calls here in Radnor Township. And Bill, we appreciate your service and also working under tough times over the last couple of years. But you did a tremendous job. We appreciate it. Thank you, Bill. Thank you very much. The next issue is a very simple one. It's a presentation of the design concept for Lancaster Avenue by Villanova University. Gentlemen?
Before you get started, I'm just going to announce that I'm disclosing that I have a conflict of interest with Villanova University in that my husband's company sells a small amount of sporting goods equipment to their athletic department. I will not be participating in the discussions or tonight or voting going forward. My residents who give feedback and input to me, I feed that input to our staff, and our staff will communicate it to the university.
Thank you, Elaine. Are you going to leave or are you going to sit?
No, I'm instructed that I can stay in the room.
Okay, all right.
Well, good evening. I'm Ken Velosky, Villanova's Vice President for Administration and Finance, and I'd like to thank the commissioners for the opportunity to present our design concept for Lancaster Avenue. I'll provide a few brief comments about the project itself and then turn it over to Graham Wyatt, our architect, to walk through the design concept. And then we'll finish with Bob Morrow, our Associate Vice President for Facilities Management, to discuss a project timeline and next steps. One of the things that we consistently hear from our students, our senior students, as we survey them and their parents each year, is that they would like to reside on campus. And we think that this project gives us the opportunity to achieve that goal, address township concerns, and also provide for a residential community that we think would just look spectacular. So as you can see here, the project will provide for approximately 1,160 upper-class undergraduate students, It will include limited Villanova-owned and operated student-centric retail. We'd relocate our university bookstore from the center of campus to a more convenient location for our alumni and students. It would also include a bistro. We're thinking of a restaurant that's solely limited to Villanova faculty, staff, students, visitors. We're not looking at any type of franchises, Starbucks, Wawa, anything of that nature which would draw traffic to the site, and we don't want to be in competition with local businesses. It would also include convenience store for our students at that site, very similar to what we have on our South Campus and our West Campus today. It'll include a performing arts center that would house the university's theater department and serve as an academic facility. We're not looking for this to provide productions for Jersey Boys or any regional touring productions. It'll solely be an academic facility that will add to the arts life at the campus and provide for not only theater but also for dance and music, and obviously a parking structure to accommodate the vehicles that are currently parked on the site. The benefits to us is we believe that we'll be able to house 85% of our undergraduate students. We think it'll create a new spectacular gateway to the university, give us the opportunity to relocate our Department of Public Safety from an obsolete facility on Lancaster Ave to the first level of the garage itself and provide our public safety with proximity not only to this development but also our South Campus and also give better proximity to our main campus itself. And we would certainly hope that it would improve relations with the township and the surrounding community. The benefits to the community, we think, are evident that if we're able to reduce our undergraduate student population in the community by half, that would remove the students and the vehicles from the neighborhoods. And if the vehicles and the students are on campus, that should significantly reduce traffic to and from the campus. Right now, as you can appreciate, the lots themselves are just hard surface lots and don't contribute at all to positive stormwater management, so this gives us the opportunity to improve stormwater management. We also believe that if the students come out of the neighborhoods and are on our campus, that should provide additional housing for families throughout the township. And certainly in terms of permit fees and construction-related taxes the university would pay to the township, it should have a significant benefit during the construction time period. We do want to make clear that this project will not result in an increase to undergraduate enrollment. We just don't have the faculty, staff, and the classroom space to accommodate an additional undergraduate enrollment. But even more importantly than that, it would be counterproductive for us to use all of these resources, build the facilities, and in an attempt to increase student and parent satisfaction and then increase enrollment, we'd put ourselves back in the same position in which we started.
Is that a commitment you're willing to make, or is that just a...
Excuse me?
Is that a commitment you're willing to make, or is that just a position you're taking?
I'm making a commitment that the university's undergraduate enrollment will not increase as a result of the project.
Will you make an increase? Well, let me. That's you put a qualifier on the end.
Kevin, why don't you let him make his presentation? You ask questions when it's your turn.
Not
Commissioners,
yet.
okay?
I want to just.
No, Kevin, can you ask your questions when the presentation is over, please? When the commissioners have comment, as soon as he's done, let him get through his comments, and then we'll ask questions.
Okay, thank you. And obviously, I'll address that in some more detail as we get through our presentation. We're very fortunate to have joining our team the Robert A.M. Stern Architects in partnership with Voith McTavish of Philadelphia. We think that both firms have unparalleled experience in terms of Gothic, collegiate-style architectural design, and in particular with regard to student housing. So it's a project that we're very excited about, and I'd like to turn it over to Graham Wyatt of Robert A.M. Stern to walk us through the design concept. Thank you.
Thank you, Ken. It's Graham Wyatt with Robert Stern Architects, and Ken has spoken about our experience, my firm's experience, and my own experience designing student residence halls. and working on academic campuses across the United States, where we have seen consistently that this type of project is both beneficial to the institution and also beneficial to the neighborhood, that students on campus are less disruptive in the neighborhood and they don't tend to drive cars, but also from the university's perspective, they end up being better, loyal, long-term alumni. They have a better track record of giving money to the institution. They are more supportive of the goals of the institution, and they ultimately tend to get better academic results. So there are any number of reasons that we understand why Villanova is doing this. We've seen this played out at other institutions, both public and private, across the United States, and so we're very pleased to be involved in this project. I'm starting here with a site plan that shows the outline of the Villanova campus and highlighting the site. The site spans Ithan Avenue on the south side of Lancaster Pike. It's approximately 11 acres right now. Ken pointed out, but I'll reiterate, almost all of it is asphalt paved parking lot right now, which will change, and the amount of impermeable area will be cut in half as a result of this project. But I also want to stress that this is a site which is really central to the campus, unlike the South Campus housing, which is south of it, or the West Campus housing, which is more remote from the historic campus core. This is really an ideal location for student housing, and so we commend the university doing this. Here is a site plan that shows the ground floor plan of the development. Here you will see with the cursor is Lancaster Avenue, here Ithan, and the site is bounded on its south side by the existing rail tracks and by a change in grade. Immediately across Lancaster Avenue to the north of the site, all of this is the broad sweeping lawn that slopes down from the historic core of the campus toward this new development of student housing. Ken pointed out it totals approximately 1,160 student beds, but they will be distributed in a series of buildings surrounding a series of courtyards, and I'll come back to the courtyards in a moment. First, along Lancaster Avenue, shown here in this rose color, is the retail space. Ken pointed out a bookstore, small restaurant. That is space which is primarily focused on the students. Some of it is relocating space that exists on campus right now, and it's located along Lancaster Avenue with a small amount of convenience parking here at the eastern edge of the site. Also along Lancaster Avenue here in blue is student services, perhaps with fitness facilities, which is in a way equivalent to retail, but really only accessible to the students, and particularly the students who are occupying these residence halls. The residence halls themselves consist of buildings which are either 4 or 5 stories tall, although, as I'll show you in a moment, the upper floors have been tucked into the roof with dormers, so that the feeling of the buildings is 3.5 stories or 4.5 stories. The residence halls themselves are laid out with a series of single rooms, double rooms, and suites. They're interconnected by open archways, which are indicated in cream here in the areas that I'm pointing to. So there is a pedestrian path that runs all the way through, connecting the one residence hall to another. Ken mentioned a parking garage. It is located here, adjacent to the rail tracks, to existing playing fields, and to Ithan Avenue, with entrance and exit, and also with an exit, right turn exit only, coming out to Lancaster Avenue. That parking garage has a capacity of approximately 1,800 cars, somewhat more than replacing the 1,700 cars that currently occupy the site. Also, that parking garage, and I'll show you more of it in a moment, is 5 stories above grade and 1 story below grade, but I'll point out that the 5 stories, the top floor is parked on a roof, so it is really a 4-story high building architecturally, and I'll show you more of that in a moment. Finally, on the site is the Performing Arts Center. Ken mentioned that. It is not as fully developed in its design yet as the rest of the building, but it will be as the rest of the development, but it's located here at the intersection of Ithan and Lancaster and is curved and inflected back toward the historic core of the campus. This is a view taken from above the chapel. You see the chapel or the church in the foreground, looking across the sweeping front lawn of the historic front lawn of Villanova University, across Lancaster Avenue, which you see in the foreground, and here are the proposed buildings. 4 stories and 5 stories. The 4 stories are all along Lancaster Avenue, 5 stories running back perpendicular from Lancaster Avenue, and a series of courtyards in between. Some of the courtyards, which are landscape, open toward the campus, and some of them open toward the south. In the distance, you see here on the left-hand side of your screen the proposed Performing Arts Center, and immediately behind that, in this portion, the proposed parking garage. Here is a view, a similar view, but taken at ground level. Imagine you're driving along Lancaster Avenue. On the left-hand side is the existing church, so that's for orientation. And on the right-hand side, you see the first portion of this residential development. And I'll reiterate what I said a moment ago. It's 3 stories tall with 1 floor occupying the dormer, and the wing that runs back here is the same height. There are some wings that are 1 story taller than that, nothing above that. Here is a view looking across the lawn. You're now more or less in front of the chapel, and you see these buildings, and you see the intervening courtyards. This is a moment to talk about the materials that will be used. We have worked hard with the university to make sure that these are long-term, 100-year buildings. The exterior will be built and detailed in Villanova schist, the same stone which is used on the best historic buildings on campus. And there will be a shingle roof, we hope a slate roof. That's the plan right now. And the mechanical equipment, which is required by these buildings, will be hidden within these low tower elements, which give the whole composition a bit of a varied Gothic skyline. But more importantly, it means that these will not be buildings that have exposed mechanical equipment on the roof. Here is a similar view, but taken in the opposite direction. You're on Lancaster Avenue looking west. Here you see just to the side a glimpse of the Performing Arts Center, and beyond that the corner of the residential development at the intersection of Ithan and Lancaster. I mentioned quadrangles a moment ago. There are larger quadrangles and small quadrangles, but all of them are connected by an open pedestrian path that passes through open archways. So this is a view of one of those quadrangles looking along the pedestrian path. People ask questions about the parking garage, and here it is. As I said, it's 4 stories of facade above grade. It does have parking on the roof. It has a corner element, corner tower, which is clad in stone and contains the elevators and the stairs that lead from all of the floors. I mentioned there is 1 floor below grade, and we have, although the design is still preliminary, worked quite hard to make sure that this is a garage where all of the interior lighting is shielded and is not visible from the outside. There are a series of vertical fins, which is a method that we've used before to allow daylight to come into the garage, but to make sure that artificial lights at night are blocked and are not visible. We have also produced a series of views which are not renderings in the same way that the views that you've just seen are renderings, but are more photo montages of computer-based perspectives on top of existing photographs. So here is a view looking along Ithan Avenue toward the south, Villanova's campus on either side of you, looking past the intersection of Lancaster, and on one side, behind the trees, you can just see the top of the parking garage and a glimpse of the Performing Arts Center. Perhaps more prominent here on the right-hand side, west of Ithan Avenue, is the corner of the student residences with shop fronts and retail along the ground floor. Here is a view looking across the existing athletic field, Villanova's athletic field, with the Performing Arts Center seen here in the center view. The high element is the fly tower that goes along with that proscenium theater, and next to it is the parking garage, 3 stories which have fins in front of them, and the 4th story is located here with stairs located at the corners. Another view on Ithan. This is Ithan from the south looking north. Here is the rail bridge in the foreground, a view through the existing trees to the parking garage with its stairs and elevators located here, and just the leading edge of the south facade of the student residences. This, I think, is a good view to make the point of the way in which this Gothic composition of architecture breaks the scale down into a series of sub-buildings with dormers and gables and pitched roofs. From the SEPTA route station, this is the existing parking lot and the existing bridge, which spans the rail lines and leads to a path which rises across Lancaster Avenue to the church. But off to the right, or the east, again, you can see a glimpse of a portion of this new student residence. And finally, looking across the Aldwin Triangle, the rail yards the rail line is in the foreground here. You just get a glimpse of it, but through the trees, you get a feeling for the scale of the new residential development. Again, it's rooftop elements, dormers, and chimneys to conceal mechanical equipment, pitched roofs, and the balance of the facade here in Villanova stone. So I'm going to pass this over now to Bob Morrow, who's Associate Vice President for Facilities with Villanova University, and he can talk about the timeline and next steps as we move forward with the project. Thank you.
Good evening. Of course, we look for your guidance and direction as we move forward, but our anticipated timeline is as follows. We've already had a series of initial neighbors meetings in the December timeframe. We're in front of you this evening. We hope to put together a package in the first week of March and submit it to the Planning Commission. Again, an informational brief similar to what we're doing here for the Planning Commission, hopefully in their April meeting. And then we anticipate another round of neighbors meetings in the spring timeframe. Design, we've done the conceptual plans that you've seen today, the renderings, the site plans, et cetera. But after that, we've paused the design, and we're waiting until we get a little bit further through the process before we restart it. When we think it's appropriate, we'll ask the architects to begin. Once the design is complete, we anticipate approximately a year of construction for the garage. We anticipate building the garage first across from the athletic complex, and we anticipate about 2 years of construction for the residence hall part of the project. The Performing Arts Center is dependent on fundraising, and so we don't have a firm timeline, but perhaps it could overlap the residence halls or be after that, depending on how the fundraising goes. Finally, we have a website, design concept for Lancaster Avenue, which is up, that has all this information on it in case anyone at home has interest in looking at any of the slides or graphics. Again, that's available. Questions or comments for us, sir?
Any commissioner have any comments? Kevin, you want to start?
Yeah, I had a question about the phraseology that was used to my earlier question. Are you willing to commit to a cap on enrollment? Because what you said was you wouldn't cause an increase in enrollment from the project, which is a loophole I could drive a truck through.
I did speak with the university's investment bankers about an enrollment cap, and their opinion was that if the university agreed to a cap, the university's credit rating would be immediately downgraded, thereby increasing our borrowing costs and increasing the total project cost. So a cap would be impossible given those circumstances, and I think what we would ask is that people look at our prior actions when we put our South Campus, when we constructed that, and when we constructed our West Campus, we did not increase enrollment at that time.
Can you, and I don't need it tonight, you guys are close to this, I'd like to understand sort of the high school demographics. Simply because you didn't increase enrollment, there could be two factors going on. So if you could just sort of get me something after the fact. Chris, whenever you get a chance.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you.
So generally, I'm in support of it. It seems like a good idea from a planning perspective. I think there's great merit to it. And then also, I think from the township perspective, the reasons that were identified seem very valid to me. One concern I have is about the significant span from in front of the chapel to Ithan Avenue and the speeds of traffic there. That my sense is that there should be some kind of traffic calming, that would be in Villanova's best interest and Radnor's best interest. So, my feedback is to look at some kind of traffic calming for that portion of the...
Sure, we'll take that under advisement. Thank you.
Well, I've been receiving a large number of emails over the last 6 months concerning this project. I represent the 7th Ward, and in some ways I may even represent my colleague, Commissioner Schaefer's ward, in her abstention. So, quite frankly, we have a small subset of the population that live directly adjacent to the campus. These are the folks that live directly against the campus. So if you're fortunate, or in some case unfortunate enough to live that close, this is your backyard. And at some point, these folks, they've already conveyed to me a lot of concern about the heights of the buildings and kind of the monsterization of the campus as it relates to their homes. The other concern I'm getting, kind of a broad concern I'm getting, is the impact on traffic during construction, but also from that point on. So what I just want to put out there now that you've formally come to us, is that I'm going to be looking for everything and anything we can do to reduce the impact on the adjacent neighbors and also the entire township. For instance, right now you have campus housing on the south side. When I attended Villanova, my perception was that the students probably cross once a day in the morning. When they attend classes, they spend most of their time on the core of the campus, and then they, at the end of their day, when they're done classes, they go on back to their housing. But with the new proposed uses that you have, you know, the bistro, Performing Arts Center, their housing much closer, it doesn't take much of a stretch to imagine that the students will now traverse Lancaster Avenue 2, 3, maybe 4 times a day. If you just do the numbers, we're looking at thousands of students a day crossing the street that currently don't cross the street. And more importantly, if you talk about a new bookstore, now I don't know if this will be in addition to the existing bookstore.
No, it will not.
Will not be.
It not be, no.
So this will be the new bookstore.
That's right. That's
and
correct.
the present enrollment in the university, I think with undergraduate and graduate, is around 10,000.
That's correct.
So we have the potential of 10,000 students having to get to that bookstore at the beginning of every semester. Now, most of us that have attended college knows that never happens in one trip. You go there, you stand in line for an hour, you get tired of waiting, you leave, you come back later, you stand in line for half an hour, you leave, you get impatient, you leave, come back again. You finally get in the line, and you only find half the books. So the next day you're there again, and you're there again. So my concern is we're going to have 10,000 students every semester, this is twice a year, maybe 3 times a year if you count the summer semester, that may be somehow traversing the pike in this, going to class, leaving class, going to the bookstore, whatever you want to call it. It's just a huge potential for a lot of pedestrian traffic. And what the big complaint I'm getting from, and I've been getting since I came into office 4 years ago, was that a huge number of people tell me that it takes 25 minutes to get to Wayne, and most of it is the congestion out in front of the university. So what I'm going to ask is, if at all possible, if you can include pedestrian bridges in this design to help soften the impact of pedestrian traffic across that university campus, whether it's under or over, I don't really care, but I'm pretty sure my constituents will care if it doesn't happen. So that's the comment I have at the present time, but certainly, I represent everyone in my ward, but I have a subset of constituents here that are front line, and they're just as important to me as everyone else, so I have to make sure that their needs are met in this whole process, because quite frankly, we're talking about 4- and 5-story buildings being constructed in their backyard. So I just, I'm open to many ideas. I'm supportive.
Thanks for your
supportive
comments,
of,
and we certainly will do our best to address your concerns.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
John, you have anything?
Fundamentally, I like your plan. However, I have a lot of concerns that I hope will be thoroughly hashed out as we move forward. I agree with John about the need for the pedestrian bridges or tunnels. I think it would be a vast improvement to the campus, and having gone down past St. Joe's many, many times in their bridge over city line, or down to Penn's campus, and they have bridge down there also. I'm concerned about the height of the buildings and the feeling that they're imposing on the neighborhood. I am concerned that the retail space you put in may put our local merchants at a competitive disadvantage. I want to see traffic studies that are realistic. I don't believe these students are going to bring their cars there and leave them in the parking garage just because they live in those dorms. And then the other concern is, what's the effect on the local housing market to pull this many people into the dorms? I've been doing some informal surveys of students at local businesses when I see students in there, and to a person, they all say they won't live on campus. So the concern is, are we going to leave the more freedom-seeking students in the community, but the more studious students, if you will move on campus. So I have a concern about that. I also have a concern about all this rental properties now being open for rental and whether or not there is a sufficient demand to keep that rented with quality renters. So there's some of the things I am certainly hoping will be thrashed out in the project.
Thank you.
Jim?
Thank you for the presentation. It looks like a wonderful project.
Thank you.
My only question is, what took you so long?
We think the same thing. Thank you. Yes.
But now that I've mentioned time, I'd like to take you back to the early 80s. I don't know if any of your officials and officers were
I was.
on the staff then.
Well, I was a student then.
Okay. Well, I was on this board in the early 80s. I haven't been on the board ever since the early 80s, but I had 2 terms. And we're going back 4 township managers to that time. And there was discussion then about the things that John Fisher and John Nagel talked about, which is safe access over the intersection of Ithan Avenue and the Lancaster Avenue. And I've got here your summary of your plan, which you gave to us in December. And I think your author of this was Venturi, Scott, and Brown.
The campus master plan.
Yeah.
So that was from 2 years ago? 2 years ago?
Let me quote, if I can, from page 4. A pedestrian-centered campus core, one of the objectives. Keeping most vehicles near the perimeter of the campus core would help create a more sustainable, pedestrian-friendly campus, while allowing access for service, emergency, and other essential vehicles. Eliminating constant conflicts between pedestrians and vehicles would allow a more cohesive, beautiful, and functional campus landscape. Now, I know you're not specifically talking about the hazards of getting across that major intersection. You're talking more about all of your you have three campuses, I guess: west, the core,
and south,
and now this one, and the one that precedes this one on the south side. But I would hope that you would go away tonight with the idea that I haven't counted heads on this, but there is substantial support on this board for making that intersection much different than it is today. And that is, as John Fisher said, how many thousands of trips of pedestrians are now using it, and how many more will be using it after this project. And just for a point of reference, I did a little non-scientific survey of other university communities to find out who's doing what with pedestrian bridges over highways. And John Nagel mentioned St. Joseph's University. The University of Delaware has one. The University of Pennsylvania does. I've used it. It's at 38th Street in Chestnut, I believe. It goes over there. The University of Richmond has one. And Vanderbilt University has. Now, I'm not saying that all of these have the layout or the topography that you are faced with there, but nevertheless, there's plenty of examples here that exist. And I also should mention that this township government built a pedestrian bridge across Matson Ford Road about 14 years ago as a result of some changes in ownership of the adjacent property there. So I would ask you very, very, very seriously to consider that, because I think what we've got on our hands here is a death waiting to happen. I'm not so interested in or concerned about traffic, moving traffic, as John Fisher is. I'm concerned about the safety of the students. We represent those students. The safety of faculty and staff, we represent them too. The safety of visitors, we represent them as well. And I think that should be foremost in your mind in doing this. And it's early enough in your plans. There's no engineering that's frozen in place. You can do it. You can create a pedestrian bridge over Lancaster Avenue. And I know from my standpoint, I'll be very happy if you do.
Well, we share your same concern about the safety of our Villanova students and faculty and staff and visitors and township residents as well. So I appreciate your feedback. Thank you.
Well, tonight you're making a presentation, and then you're coming with formal plans in March?
That's correct.
Yeah. So when you come with the formal plans, you come to the commissioners with those formal plans, and we'll refer it to our planning commission. And then we'll spend months at our planning commission, where the public will have a lot of input into this plan and the development of this plan. So now I'd like to open it up to the public. Anyone in the public has...
Bill, I have one more question.
I'm sorry, John.
Have you looked at the project from our code standpoint to know how many exceptions and exemptions you're going to be needing?
I'll turn to Nick Canelli.
John, what we're looking to do here is do an overlay, an amendment to the zoning code, and we would do an overlay district with it. Then probably, in addition to that, we would have to file a petition to rezone this area with the overlay district. So probably what we anticipate, maybe is a little bit different than what was said previously. I think what we would do is file an amendment, a request for an amendment to the code, together with a request for the rezone of this area to that overlay district. And then I believe we wouldn't have a public hearing. You would schedule a public hearing and refer it to the Planning Commission with all the plans, and they would report back and with recommendations and whatever else, just like you would on a regular amendment to the zoning code. I think that would probably be the accurate way to proceed, and I'll ask John Rice if that kind of makes sense.
Yeah, that's one way to proceed. It probably makes the most sense for this, but you're going to have, whether it's an overlay or some other zoning designation, that along with the land development plan would proceed at the same time.
Yeah, probably what we want to do is file everything. If it was eventually approved, everything would be approved at the same time, the land development plan, the zoning amendment, and the overlay and rezoning, so that everything's in conjunction, that we're not doing separate plans.
You want to make sure that whatever ends up on the land development plan is reflected in the zoning amendment, so that you don't make a zoning amendment and then find out that what gets built is not what you want, or that's been vetted during the land development process. So they can move sort of parallel, all in front of the Planning Commission, ultimately coming to this board after the Delaware County Planning Commission reviews it.
Yeah. And that's kind of what we did on West Campus when we rezoned that area. Everything moved in conjunction.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
If I may just add, first I want to thank Villanova for presenting this plan also to the residents. Attending those two meetings you had in December there, I thought they were very helpful. From the resident feedback, the hope would be is that there were a lot of good comments made by the residents that I think is beneficial. They have very valid points if you take those into strong consideration. Because from the township's perspective, I think we agree with a lot of the comments the residents made, but also stormwater management is a huge issue that we hope to resolve a number of those issues. The impact with the parking garage, the lighting, which I think was addressed, but also I know parking, pedestrian traffic, as the commissioners had spoken about, but also the impact too that will come into play now with bigger buildings, of where that bounce of sound will come from the train, and that of how that may bounce into the neighborhoods too as well, to look at that impact and traffic flow. Speaking with our superintendent today and their staff traffic, looking at the model out there may be some concerns there. So I think as part of that, to take into consideration those comments from the residents, from the commissioners, and I think if you take a lot of those into, I think the process should move a lot smoother. And I think from the neighborhood and from the residents, that impact, I think they'll be very appreciative that their voice has been heard. Thank you.
Thank you. Would any member of the public like to comment on this concept? Yes. Come to the mic, please.
Elaine Scherer. I live at 231 South Ithan Avenue on the block between Villanova and Agnes Irwin. I have two concerns. One won't last too long. It's traffic, because I have an idea that maybe Irwins may not have finished their construction in 2013 when Villanova is planning on starting the parking garage. I think they should be aware of the traffic, where will the people who are going to work on that are going to park, that we don't have more traffic going up and down Ithan Avenue. My second concern is storm water management. In the 80s, Jim, maybe exactly when the South Campus was started,
Mid-'80s.
Mid-'80s, yeah. They built over what used to be a ice skating pond, or a pond. I know they probably did some management of berms, whatever, but at that since that time, the block of Ithan Avenue going down between Ithan Avenue and the houses on Browning Lane. I think this is a lot of Radnor Township. It may not just be here. The water that comes down when we have a heavy rain is amazing, okay? It's a real flood. So that when they're building the parking garage, they have to do something to prevent more water going down, because I think if you look at the elevation, the parking garage will be above the level of the ground, is at an altitude a little bit higher as you go down towards Agnes Irwin, and water flows downward. So this, I think the concept of the dorms, that looks great, and it probably would be a good change to the parking lot on Lancaster Pike. But as I say, those are my two concerns. Thank you.
Thank you, Elaine. Anyone else?
First, I should try to introduce myself.
Yes.
My name is Cheryl Tamola. I live on Midland Avenue in Wayne. First, Villanova promised us a bridge before. When they developed the West Campus, I was on the Planning Commission, and one of the stipulations was that Villanova would put a pedestrian bridge across Lancaster Avenue.
It was under Lancaster Avenue.
It was
as I
either.
recall.
We
Yes.
let them, that was up to them.
Well, that's the plan
Either
they developed, yes.
over or under Lancaster Avenue to accommodate what was then an even more dangerous intersection than it is now that we have the walk light. So just be wary of what gets promised. Secondly, interestingly enough, this week, I got my new issue of Planning Magazine. It's the magazine of the American Planning Association. And one of the major articles is about campus controls. It has to do with transportation on campuses. And it shows what other universities have done to reduce the need for automobiles. I know I've talked to people at Villanova about this before, but it includes a number. Villanova is extremely well served by public transportation. And as such, maybe a parking garage like this is overbuilt, just suggesting. That these other, it talks about the cost of a parking space and what better things could be done with the university than spending it on a parking space. And it gives you a whole menu of other options between zip cars and using the transportation that's there now and facilitating bicycle transit. So I'm sure somebody at Villanova belongs to the American Planning Association and could read this article. If not, please feel free to contact me, and I'll make sure you get a copy of it.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Good evening. I have a couple things. My name is John Heckscher. I live at 38 Aldwin, which actually, when you saw view 12, that was taken from my front yard. So it's obviously very important to us that we make sure that as this goes through, it is done with the neighborhood in mind as much as the students. As a resident of Radnor, I think it's very, very important that we feel as residents that we are not losing our quality of life for your benefits. There's, as we've mentioned, a number of people, the traffic. First of all, I think it would be wise to look at Ithan to see if Ithan can handle that one parking lot and everyone coming out right there on Ithan. And is there a way possibly even to think about funneling everyone north on Ithan towards Lancaster to avoid the problems that you've heard about Ithan already? Second of all, with that parking lot, right now you have 1,700 spots. You're going to have 1,800 shortly. When there are, if everyone's on campus now, when there are events at the arena or at the stadium, I don't see where those cars are going to be able to park if we already have all of your students on campus. So I'd like to hear how that would be addressed. Another thing that I think is important for the neighborhood, especially Aldwin Lane, is that right now your design has a lot of the courtyards facing our neighborhood rather than facing away. And I think we're very concerned that the noise that will be created by having gathering spots in courtyards facing us, as well as some people have said, the P&W train going by and bouncing off, is something that is very concerning to us. So we're wondering, maybe is that something that can be addressed or changed or somehow, spoken about? The stormwater management obviously is a very important thing, and we just, I think, feel as a community, one thing that every single person I've talked to in Radnor seems to be concerned of is that we're proud that we're not Lower Merion, and we haven't given in to the buildings that you see at St. Joe's and elsewhere throughout Lower Merion, where there are tremendously big buildings that sort of lower the standard of living of that community. And if we allow this to go forward, does this mean that down the road we're going to have the next group come and say that we want Wayne to get bigger? And could we get some sort of if we do decide to go forward with bigger buildings, which I think a number of people are against, is there a way to make sure this doesn't happen throughout the township and we don't become like the surrounding townships that we're proud not to be? And that would be a question for all of you as well.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Hi, Susan Kelly, 32 Aldwin Lane. Thank you for the presentation. It was really a beautiful presentation of the plans for Villanova, and it looks gorgeous. I think it could be a great plus to our area. A lot of the concerns were already touched on. Mr. Curley mentioned something about traffic calming on Lancaster Avenue, which at this point, traffic barely moves on Lancaster Avenue through Villanova. So that doesn't seem, I understand what you mean, but I think the issue is more that there's already so much traffic at the Villanova University area, and then beyond with 320, with the Blue Route and all of that. It's horrific, that whole portion before Radnor-Chester Road from the beginning of Villanova. No traffic is speeding through there at all because it's bumper to bumper. The same with South Ithan. Coming up to South Ithan and Lancaster Avenue is usually backed up, as it is, without all of these cars coming in and out on South Ithan from one parking garage. It does look like there's a road that goes up behind the proposed Performing Arts Center, but it doesn't look like that's truly considered as an entrance or an egress. So the traffic, which is already almost impossible on South Ithan, would just get worse. It's also the same across the street on North Ithan between the bridge on that side and in through the campus. So the traffic all in all of those roads through the neighborhoods, South Ithan, North Ithan, Lancaster Avenue, it's gridlocked. People try to cut through all the other neighborhoods, Meadowood, Aldwin Lane, Braxton, Lowry's, and I think that's what a lot of the issue, that's part of what the issue that the neighbors have is about. Besides the fact that if you drive through some of the neighboring streets in the spring, all you hear is blaring music from Villanova. And this point about about Agnes Irwin's building and Villanova's building, if those are both going on at the same time, then the only way to get in and out of that area is through Aldwin Lane and Meadowood. And Aldwin Lane is, just about it's a two-way street that gets blocked up as it is. It's a two-way street that's about the size of a one-way street. You know, same with Meadowwood and,
You have to get closer to the mic.
oh,
Okay.
sorry.
Yeah.
So the
Okay.
traffic studies that are being done with that, is that something that's on the?
Yes, they'll be doing traffic studies, and they'll be presented to the Planning Commission in detail for you to
And
comment on.
there will be a way to keep all the overflow traffic from just decimating the
We're going to have
surrounding
detailed
area?
studies to prevent that from happening.
Okay.
We'll find ways to do that. Okay?
All right.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
I'm Patty Barker from Garrett Hill, Rosemont. First, I wanted to read an email that was sent to me by my neighbor. She asked me if I would read it. Jean Brunna, who lives on Lewis Lane. Because it is hard for me to get out at night, I won't be at the meeting on Monday to hear Villanova's proposal, but I do want to say something. After looking at the plans for the proposed development along Lancaster Avenue, I think Villanova is not being realistic. Even using their parking lots, there is no room for the expansion they want. This is not countryside and wooded areas where expansion will have no impact on the traffic along Lancaster Pike, let alone the streets around the university. It is impossible to drive on Lancaster Avenue from Bryn Mawr to Wayne now. What will it be like with the expansion Villanova is planning? I can understand Villanova wanting to grow, but there is no room along Lancaster Avenue. So that's my neighbor, Jean Brunna. I just wanted to say, Villanova's development plan promises major benefits for the university and the greatest development impact on our community that we will probably experience in our lifetimes. Most everyone supports and applauds Villanova's goal of bringing more of their students onto campus. While no one is anti-development, we are certainly concerned with the impact it will have on our communities. Our concerns center around quality of life issues, including increased traffic, bottlenecks on Lancaster Avenue, and spillover onto our local and Conestoga Road, increased population and density, both on and off campus, increased pedestrian safety due to the increased traffic and population, the effect of the 17,000 square feet of retail on our local businesses. Villanova is not permitted to build these new structures on Lancaster Avenue under our current zoning rules. They are seeking substantial zoning exceptions, including raising height allowances to approximately 60 feet from our current 38, reducing setback requirements to 45 feet from either 60 in R1 or 125 in residential. In institutional. Villanova is seeking local community support and wishes to be sensitive to community concerns. It seems the path to earn community trust is for the university to truly recognize and mitigate any adverse impacts, investing in their future as well as the future of the greater community. That's being a good neighbor. And it's not unusual for development projects such as this to set aside funds to address these effects and impacts. I leave you with two questions. Number one, what is the justification for granting any relief? Number two actually was sort of addressed by Nick, but it is Villanova seeking zoning relief from the Zoning Board or from the Board of Commissioners? Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Philip R. I live on Meredith Avenue. And I'd like to thank you for listening to both the university and to Radnor residents on this development. I would join many others in both congratulating Villanova for an ambitious goal to bring more of their students into an on-campus residential environment and thanking them for their efforts to inform the neighbors and townships of their plans. We know it will look beautiful and impressive and big. And while the project brings many benefits to Villanova and some to surrounding communities, this would be a major shift as proposed. It cannot help but also bring major impacts, perhaps unintended, but real just the same. And I encourage the commissioners and others involved to take the following into consideration. Next to the residents immediately bordering the university, it's very likely the Garrett Hill area will take the greatest long-term impact for three reasons. One, while creating rooms for 1,160 students, they'll still have 900 plus living off campus. Most, if not all, of the remaining off-campus population will still reside in Radnor, more specifically Garrett Hill and the immediate area. It's more likely that housing in other townships further away will see the reduced student rentals, but there is no benefit or change to Garrett Hill or Radnor in that regard. And the net effect is adding over 1,000 people to Radnor's population. What does that mean to Radnor? What does it mean for Garrett Hill? Secondly, Villanova has chosen to situate these new dorms on a major route through Radnor. 1,160 students, 20% of their on-campus population, right on Lancaster Avenue. Stressed as a beautiful gateway onto campus, it is so because it's on a very public U.S. highway. Good for Villanova, but to what effect for others? 3, Villanova is asking for significant exceptions to zoning requirements just to be able to create this development, including raising height allowances from 3 to 4 or 5 stories, not in the middle of campus where it's out of way, but on the heaviest of traffic routes in the township. And also reducing front setbacks from 125 feet to 45 feet, closer to the street than allowed for single-family homes. Now, development of this magnitude will create positive changes and shift problems into other areas. The above facts make those in Garrett Hill especially cautiously concerned with issues that center around quality of life, including increased traffic, where bottlenecks on Lancaster Avenue spill over to our local and Conestoga roads. Now, the closest of our 4 or 5-story buildings and the 1,100 additional students they house is bound to make traffic congestion even worse than it already is. In addition to that, we've already heard talks about concerns about pedestrian safety for both the students and faculty members and people who work there who have to cross that street. Locals and savvy commuters will turn to alternative routes, including through Garrett Hill neighborhoods. Now, if you have any doubt about this possibility, let me phrase this question another way from the reverse side. If you were to plan a U.S. highway and a major route through a township through a campus, would you do it right through the middle of the campus? The reverse is what we're talking about doing. So it has its own concerns. How would we address them? Secondly, you have increased population and density both on campus and unchanged off campus. And thirdly, increased pedestrian safety issues. Some, as mentioned, in addition to the students crossing Lancaster Avenue, we have collector roads like Lowry's Lane and Garrett Avenue that are ill-equipped for traffic increases. Conestoga Road and Garrett Hill is already vulnerable to pedestrian safety issues with no sidewalk on much of its north side, with a neighborhood shopping district at its center, and a neighborhood park serving many who must cross right there. Now, should or when this development occurs, in addition to softening the effects of this major change in our township, what can be done to improve pedestrian safety? What can be done to improve quality of life in neighboring areas? I respectfully ask that you consider these concerns and others that will certainly come to light, both in your consideration of exceptions and efforts to remediate the inevitable new problems that will affect our neighbors in Radnor and Garrett Hill. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Good evening. My name is Bob Escrow. I'm at 46 Aldwin, and I'm right at the corner of Aldwin and Ithan, right in front of the South Dorm. And I do thank Villanova for presenting this evening, and they've reached out to us a few other times, and I appreciate that as well. And we really want to help and participate in the discussion and really make it a better plan overall. I think it's great, and I support it personally, but there are a number of concerns that I have, and I could probably go on and on for a long time. So I'm going to be real quick and brief, and I know I'll forget a lot of stuff. The bottom line to me, it's too tall, it's too narrow of a space, and it's too close to the road. I personally would support something that was within code, the proper setback, the 3 stories on down. The parking garage, in my opinion, is on the wrong side of the road, and it's dysfunctional. And I don't just say that without giving an idea of where it should be. I feel that the parking garage ought to be in between the pavilion and the stadium on the back side. If you've got events at the pavilion, you can park there. You don't have to cross Lancaster Avenue. If you've got event at the stadium, it would be connecting. Right now there's a parking area there, and it seems like it would fit real nicely. That would alleviate the traffic concern. The traffic concern that we have now is approximately around 8 to 8:30 in the morning. Traffic backs up to my house, and we're all afraid that if something like this happens, there's 3 exits or entrances that are proposed on Ithan. 1 coming from behind the dorm and 2 by the parking garage. And we're afraid that as those cars build up, from community residents, we realize that they won't be students, but they're going to cut through Aldwin. They're going to cut through Meadowwood. And more importantly, people from outside the area are going to learn it's tough to go down Lancaster Avenue. I'm going to take Conestoga Road. Now that's going to then become a mess. So you're going to start seeing traffic flow out. Excuse me. The other concern is why move the bookstore? If it's in the centrally located on the campus, why move it? The other concern that we have is what happens to the buildings when they're moved into the new facility. For example, there's a small dorm on Lancaster Avenue that houses maybe 50 to 75 kids. What's going to happen to that building when those students, I assume, move into the new dorm? What happened to the infirmary building when the new infirmary was built? Those buildings still remain the same, and we're not utilizing that space. The other concern is how tall is the equipment? We saw that the equipment is housed on the top of the dorms, and does that exceed even more than 5 stories? And I feel that I feel honestly that enrollment is not an issue. That if you look at Villanova's enrollment compared to other universities, they're really right at the mark. But with that said, if you look at U.S. News and World Report, they mentioned Georgetown, and they have 0 cars on campus. Now, I'm sure that they have some, but we'd like to see reduced cars. If the students are driving to campus now from area communities, why would they need a car on campus if they're now on campus? And again, right now, it's hard enough to go down Lancaster Avenue between 4 and 6 o'clock, and I can't imagine what it would be like. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I'm Joe Vandergeest. I live at Buckingham Drive. I thank Villanova for being open so far. I'm a resident, and we're all residents, and so is Villanova. Now's the time to really be a good neighbor.
Sorry, you got to talk into the mic and address.
I said now's the time, I think, for Villanova to really be a good neighbor and not just posture and say, hey, we're going to have a couple of meetings and we want to do this, but to really mean it and to sincerely do it. When we bought where I live, I think the closest to the property. Is that right, Chris? I think pretty darn close. We bought here, and we love being around the university, as it is right now. And I know I speak for a couple of our other neighbors. I don't think we're staying. And I'm not the only one saying that. I mean, you're saying ignite change. This is going to change not only your campus, it's going to change Radnor Township, as is right now. That's sort of it.
Thank you.
Good evening, James Schneller. I live at the Britton Field in St. David's. However, I traverse Lancaster Pike at least 4 times a week, and I have since I was a wee child. And I have some critiques I'd like to quickly make. I really think that it's time that our quality of life came before some of the larger institutions in Radnor. And it's not their fault, but it's simply a growth matter. Radnor is blessed with very slow growth. Why not take advantage of that? I think that Ithan Creek should be mentioned. I think there will be detrimental effects on the small tributary that's running down along Ithan Ave. I've fought for other objectives along that creek, and I believe that everything that's in the law and in our natural comfort and well-being scope is in need of a look at that. I wish you would ignore the Blue Route. This obviously is going to get some attention. Ignore the Blue Route catch-all. You can't depend on the Blue Route forever. As someone said, if you drive Lancaster Avenue at certain hours, we've hit gridlock. I object strongly to a performing arts center. I think this is a large chunk of new growth, of new traffic, and of general new impediments of growth that we do not need. If it involves that height, there's another reason. We have to pay attention to our current status quo, and that's what you're here for. The expansion is not likely to reduce rentals, or at least not for long. And as we all know from watching other colleges and universities, growth is just another stepwise piece of the action. Finally, I'd ask you to negotiate a couple of swaps. If Villanova is going to build a retail center, would you kindly ask them to put the bar rooms in Garrett Hill into their center? Garrett Hill shouldn't suffer these bar rooms anymore. There's nothing unusual about a township lending a little oil
Jim,
or encouraging.
That's not an issue. Let's talk about relevant
Well, I'm
issues.
sorry, that's why I'm saying it, because others might
It's
not.
not relevant. We have no control over that.
We have a lot of control because
All right.
all the students head there.
Yeah, go ahead.
Likewise, if you can negotiate with SEPTA, 3 bus shelters, say at Sproul, Eithman, and Garrett Road, or Garrett Ave, would encourage use of the buses. There are now 2 buses on Lancaster Pike. Student use of them to Ardmore, Devon, Gennardi's, you name it. St. Joe's, they all use the bus. Twice as many will use it. So thank you. And please turn down the request completely.
Thank you.
Kevin Geary. I live at 4 Blackfriar Road in the Old Oaks neighborhood. And what we're talking about here really is trust with potentially no consequences. The university said they were going to build a pedestrian footbridge. They didn't do it. What was the consequence? What did you guys, as our elected officials, levy against them for not doing that? You have a lot of people here. There's a lot of older Radnor Township residents here. What happens if in 3 years they've got to sell their house in the middle of a construction? When all of a sudden, instead of 90 days to sell a house, it takes a year, or the value of their home goes down $50,000. Where's the consequences? You say that we're going to have ample parking, yet your rendering out there has parallel or street parking off of Lancaster Ave, yet it's not up there. You talk about, oh, well, we've had studies that show that these are good things for the community, good things for the campus. Are they independent studies, or did you pay for them? And if you did, are you going to make them public? Trust, consequences. So if we're going to move forward with this, which is, you go up here and you make a nice 20 or 30-minute proposal, we have to live with this for 2 to 3 generations. Well past you guys have gotten your retainer checks.
You want to address the board instead of them, just address us. Thank you.
Why?
Because we're the ones that you're talking
Okay,
to.
well, we'd like you to ask some more detailed questions then.
Fine.
If this is going to go forward, they delayed this a month due to the death of a priest, yet I see the timeline isn't pushed back 30 days. It's still along the same path. Is that less time for public comment and for open hearings? It seems like a very rushed 4 or 5 month process for the whole university that's going to be...
It's not going to be rushed. We're going to have all the public comment and discussion that we need.
What happens if they can't fund the whole project? What happens if the parking lot gets built but the Fine Arts Center doesn't get built? What happens to that field, which basically is the only buffer between our neighborhood and the university? What happens if they can't fund the whole thing? What happens to the field? So, we're giving a lot of trust in the township. We're giving a lot of trust in the university. They put up pretty trees to block the view. A year later, there's no trees. What's the consequence? And at the end of the day, we all know the only consequence that's going to get anyone to pay any attention is monetary and fines. So if we're going to go through this process, and you guys are going to be our elected officials and our stewards to sort of guide us in this process, if they don't meet their marks, what's the consequences? I live in a period where I keep getting told that the university is going to shut off the lights in the football stadium at 9 or 10 o'clock. I go into my son's room at 1 a.m., and it looks like it's lit up like the 4th of July. Where's the consequences for that? Should the university be fined every time? And if those fines are going to happen, should it go to property tax relief for the people who may lose the values of their home over the next 10, 20, or 30 years? So.
Hi, I'm Tony Bailey from Conestoga Village. I have two comments or questions. I would like to know if there's been a study concerning the pollution.
We're not answering questions, we're taking comments from you. So you can ask your question, but we're not going to answer them, okay?
Has there been a study concerning the amount of pollution that is going to be created by this construction over the next 3 to 4 years? We have a church, which is the center of the university, that not only serves the university, but the community. I have not heard where those parishioners will be able to park. Not only that, but when we have Easter and Christmas services, when we have weddings, and when we have funerals. Thank you.
Thank you.
Jim Yiannopoulos, 15 Braxton Road. Some of you know, some of you may not know what I do for a living and have for a few years now. I work as a consultant helping high school students figure out where they might want to go to college, how to get in, the application process, everything. So I certainly do understand why they're interested in building more dorms for the students. As part of my job, I make it a point to really know what's going on campuses. I visit at least 30, 35 campuses every year. In the last 3 years, I've probably visited over 150. I do have to say I'm not aware of another one where students do have to cross a state highway to get to the bookstore. You know, so I know there's a lot of resistance to building bridges, pathways, whatever it is, but I think it's necessary. I was driving over here tonight, and 2 students ran across Lancaster Avenue as I was driving over against the light. It is an accident waiting to happen. The other thing I'd just like to say is, while I understand that they want to do this, the way that they do it is really important, and it is definitely not a hardship case. And my understanding is to grant such huge zoning variances, it really does need to be hardship.
There's no zoning variances. They're coming directly to the commissioners. So there's no hardship required.
There's no hardship required?
Yes.
So you could just ignore the zoning variances?
No, the zoning variances, if you ask for, they're not going to ask for zoning variance. They're not going to zoning hearing board. They're going to the Board of Commissioners. We'll make the decision.
Okay. Well, that's interesting because, I mean, what they are asking for is over twice as close to the road as is allowed by zoning, and it's twice as high as is allowed. So it would be interesting that you would do that, considering you have to consider what are the benefits to the township, certainly. I'd really be interested in what those are. You know, I hear a lot about what the university contributes to the community, and they do. I'm not denying that. There's a lot they contribute. But it does not seem to me that they will not contribute these things anymore if they do not get these variances or get the project the way they're proposing it. You know, they're going to continue to accept students. They're going to continue to collect tuition. They're not going to go out of business if you don't approve it as presented. They're going to continue to hire employees. So I'd like to point those things out. As you may also know, I am president of the Northeast Radnor Homeowners Association. We currently have 68 members. I suspect with this proposal, we'll get up over 100 again. You know, I won't repeat some of the things other people have said. I will just agree that there are concerns about traffic, concerns about during construction, how that will be handled, and as the gentleman before me pointed out, how those things will be enforced. Because, you know, I've been before some of you before regarding another project, and there were certain agreements that were made, and as this gentleman points out, they're not always adhered to. So what are the consequences? How do we enforce this if we do it with certain conditions? Finally, I was really surprised to hear earlier that they weren't willing to commit to a cap on the student population. I was at a meeting on January 4th And at that meeting, Villanova's president, Father Peter Donahue, promised us that the size of the student body would not increase, and that, I quote, "I will put it in my blood." Now, that's a little dramatic, and we certainly wouldn't ask for that, but we would like to see it in ink, on paper, with a time period of 20 to 30 years. Thank you.
Thank you. So the young lady coming up.
Hi, my name is Anna Marie Hessman. I live on Barley Cone Lane, the road that directly backs up to my side of the road directly backs up to the field. You saw a visualization of my back fence in the presentation tonight. I don't know if I should be flattered that they liked my fence, or maybe there's just a hole there. In any case, I want to start by saying I love Villanova University. It's the parish I grew up in, the neighborhood I grew up in Rosemont, which many people don't know exists anymore due to the changes there that have happened in my lifetime. And I was baptized in the chapel that I would no longer be able to see if this plan is approved. There was a lot of usage of the term will today, although much of the plan is not permitted under our current law. It's kind of funny for me to keep hearing this will happen, as if this is some sort of certitude. This has yet to be approved, and I would like them to start acknowledging that in their plans when they're requesting for this to happen. And I heard in some of Kevin's remarks talk about trust. Since I moved back to Radnor, I moved from Manhattan, where, as you know, there's a lot of light and noise pollution to residents in a high-density area. I moved home to an area that has changed, as I said, a lot over my lifetime, but bought a small piece of something that had surrounded by a lot of open area. And I had no reason to believe that these somewhat drab parking lots that are above grade compared to my home would suddenly blossom into multi-story buildings that are unattractive to look at, as far as I'm concerned. But the question of trust for me is that when I was a young person, the stadium did not have giant floodlights. It had noise, which I was used to and had learned to expect and thought was even kind of comforting, a sound of home. But I have to have the shutters drawn on one side of my house nonstop after dark or before daybreak because the floodlights are so strong. They flood our entire neighborhood. And there's not really a specific law that prohibits them from doing that, but it's a question of being a good neighbor, as far as I'm concerned. And I'm very concerned that this small thing of floodlights has gone unaddressed for so long. I've complained maybe a couple times. I haven't made a huge deal of it because I'm a fairly busy person, and I don't have a lot of time to nag the university about their floodlights. But very concerned about an extended multi-year construction project with all of this stuff going on in this atmosphere where we can't even manage some floodlights that are not necessary for day-to-day usage of that facility. My understanding is they put them in for televised events, and that if you just want practice in a stadium, you don't need giant fog lights that are extended up and light up the ground in the neighborhoods, the dark neighborhoods nearby. But I also wanted to compliment the plan, which I did at the neighborhood meeting. The dorms are very attractive looking. Of course, they're not the part that would be next to my property. But I'm concerned about the magnified impact of all the buildings on the higher grade, the loss of my view, which for me, that's a huge quality of life. When I come home, I'd like just my little tiny piece of peace and quiet. There's not much of it, but I have a little right now. I can sometimes see the fireworks at Radnor High School if I kind of stand in a specific spot, which I think would be blocked by the parking garage. And I'm also concerned about the potential huge change in the population density in my immediate neighborhood. Right now, we are a highly populous area of Radnor Township. The buildings are close together. We used to joke that I came from the slums of the main line because it was normal middle-class housing, but it's all really close together, and it's cleverly engineered. Whoever did those developments was very clever to kind of keep them from impinging on each other. But sticking more of it right next to it makes that less, it puts more pressure on that sensibility of being too close together, I think. You know, just my innate sense of how it's engineered. And when the gentlemen were giving the presentation for the neighbors earlier in the year, they spoke about how they had no plan to increase comings and goings, or they didn't want it to become a destination. Like, well, if you build it, they will come. It sounds like a lot of fun. You know, the Performing Arts Center, you know, I'm with Father Peter, that sounds like a lot of fun, but people will come there. You have a football game, you have a show, you have a wedding, and then you have the kids parked all at the same time. And where are you going to put all of this? And I think that's really, my sense is that it is a little overly ambitious. And I do love the university, but I don't think this is a good idea. Thank you.
Thank you. This young lady here.
My name is Suzanne McLean. I live on Hawthorne Lane in Old Oaks, and I would just like to say that I think that the surrounding properties, that neighborhoods that we've heard from tonight, is what makes Villanova as great as it is. I mean, they're jogging through our streets. You know, they love our houses. They graduate from there. They come and buy houses in our neighborhood. If this happens and it's, you know, gets out of hand, I think that our property values will go down.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Colleen Price, and I live at 352 Shimoni Road. And honestly, I'm pretty shocked from what I've heard tonight. I think when people elected to be our commissioners, we expect you to enforce our law. This plan is completely against our law. There are no 5-story buildings allowed in the college zones at all. There are no 5-story parking garages. Look in this township and tell me how many 5-story parking garages we have. None. How many 5-story buildings? 2 or 3. This is huge. And the way it's presented, it looks beautiful. If I were a commissioner and they came to me, I'd say, this is against the law. You go back and look at the law, give me 3-story buildings, and give me a beautiful plan. Everyone's going to love that beautiful plan. And having them skirt zoning, they can't possibly get this through on zoning. That's why they're not going to the zoning hearing board. There is no hardship here. And to go to the board and have you go and say this is some sort of law we're going to pass for the welfare of the community, well, Villanova's already played this game. In 1990, Villanova came to this Board of Commissioners, and they rezoned 50 acres, what was called the Morris Estate. It is now their West Campus. When they came to us, it was the same argument. We're really worried about these poor neighbors. We don't want our students living in this neighborhood. Let us build all these big dorms, and we'll get them out of the neighborhoods. We have 6,200 students. We're going to come down to 5,700. You granted it to them. You killed Worcester Road. Those people lost property values, probably cut their property values in half. They sued the township, and they lost. All those dorms are in there. How many students do they have? They told you they go to 5,700. They have 7,000 right now. That's just their undergraduate population, not their night school, not their graduate program. So do not play this game again. They've told you that once before. They're not out to save the health and welfare of the township. This is for their own growth. And honestly, the pattern of lawlessness that has been established by this board is why Villanova came here. I would never come in an R1 district and tell you I want to build 4 houses. Give me some time to give you a presentation. You'd shoot me down. It's against the law. Why would Villanova come in and think they can do this? Because Agnes Irwin's getting to build a field that's not connected to their buildings, their academic buildings. It's against our law. Can Eastern University own a parking lot that's not next to their academic buildings? No. Do we let them do it? Sure. It's against our law. I talked to our solicitor, and he said, we don't have to enforce our laws. This is how Radnor Township operates. And the whole tone of this meeting is this is going to happen. I mean, we're going to work on your parking and your lighting, but you are going to get 5-story buildings back here. And I personally think it's absolutely outrageous. And this whole idea that these retail stores are for the students only is really just a way to skirt the parking requirements. Commercial buildings that are open to the public have huge parking requirements, and they're never going to be able to meet it. And I've been fighting this college zoning. I've been trying to redo the law for 2 years. We were supposed to hire an outside group to do this. Whatever happened to that? They haven't been hired, and then I look on the agenda, and we're going to spend $24,000 tonight to have an engineer lay out a sidewalk from the St. David's train station to Eastern University's cut-through. For Eastern University, that was a requirement that they had to do to put in their student union building. Our township is broke. We're spending $24,000.
Excuse me. Eastern has escrowed $80,000. We're not paying for that project. Eastern is paying for that.
Well, it says $24,000 for you to hire an
24,000
engineer.
Easter's paying for that. We're not paying for that.
Get the universities to start paying for that. They're already a third of our
They
population.
are paying for that.
They should.
Thank you.
Well, I honestly, I think this is a disgrace that it has come this far. If they had an issue, they should go to the zoning hearing board and get shot down where
Thank
they
you.
belong. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Good evening. My name is Paul McNabb. I live at 28 South Roberts Road in Bryn Mawr in Long Marine Township, a stone's throw from County Line Road. South Roberts Road is right between Lancaster Avenue and County Line Road. So I'm just in Long Marine, just across from Radnor. My wife and I live at 28 South Roberts Road and raised our 4 sons there, the youngest of who is a senior in high school right now and will be looking to go to college. I'm a parishioner at St. Thomas of Villanova. As a matter of fact, yesterday, Sunday, I was at Mass, and Father Peter Donahue, to his credit, still comes down to Rosemont and says Mass there. My wife and I were married on the campus, in the chapel on campus. I'm a member of the Bryn Mawr Civic Association, and twice last year, the Dean of Students, Paul Pugh, came to the Bryn Mawr Civic and spoke. And the fact that he came back the second time, I give him credit for that, because it wasn't a welcoming committee or group because of what we deal with in terms of students in our neighborhood. So I welcome this plan to bring students back to the campus. And I was at the December 6th meeting and listened to that presentation. Met Mr. Volosky, spoke to him briefly, along with our Commissioner Scott Zeloff. But the issues here, I think, are directly related. A gentleman earlier mentioned the bars. What we tolerate, it's unbelievable what we go through in an evening along South Roberts Road. Home Properties of Bryn Mawr, which is in Radnor Township, is basically a Villanova dormitory. The other gentleman from the president's office, Chris Kowalski and Christine Quisenberry, came to Bryn Mawr Civic meeting last year. We asked about how many students are living in the Home Properties of Bryn Mawr. Well, we can't tell you that. Paul Pugh, I gave him a letter, an article actually, from the Washington Post, what Georgetown University did to appease the neighbors when they went up before the government that they had to get their 10-year zoning hearing approval for. One of the things they did was to shuttle students from the bars at night back to wherever they came from, rather than walk through and disturb neighbors at night. I can basically get back to sleep pretty quickly. Unfortunately, my wife cannot. And so that we have health care, she works full-time now. The Dean of Students, Paul Pugh, said we're not going to shuttle the students. It's as simple. So when Mr. Volosky here tonight says, well, we can't guarantee a cap on enrollment, it really raises concerns for me, because all the dean had to say last year when he was at the civic meeting was, sure, we realize the problems you have, and we'll get these students back. They have a shuttle. It runs till at least midnight, if not later. The dean said, we don't bring students to the bars. One night I followed the group.
We're not discussing the shuttle, we're discussing this plan, so if you could keep the comments to this plan.
Okay.
I understand.
But I think this has to do with the
I
attitude
understand
of
the problems
Villanova
in the
University.
community,
Okay.
and you're in favor of moving them back. I understand that, so just address this project. I appreciate it.
Very good. I think, I support that. The Bryn Mawr Civic got involved with the Garrett Hill Coalition last year. That came about because of the SGA dinner at Villanova. And then Bryn Mawr Civic got involved in the Welcome Back Students Picnic held at the Radnor Methodist Church. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time. My name's Andrew McGregor. I live on the corner of Broughton Lane and County Line, so I'm really a Lower Merion Township resident, but I am a neighbor as well. I'm coming to speak to the board about the plan because I had recent experience with Villanova around the law school project, which really crossed both townships. What I want to say for all the neighbors here that I hear some anger and cynicism, I would encourage them to channel it with the guidance of the board and the zoning commission in a constructive resolution. We did that, and I will say, with regard to the management team that's here locally, they fulfilled every single commitment they made to us over the last 3 years. They didn't have to, they stepped up to it. I think they are setting a new tone in terms of their attitude toward working with the neighborhood and the community. So I would encourage you that you should help guide the comments to a resolution that's fruitful for the community, for each of the neighbors, which I believe you can do, and for the university. And I think you'll come out with a landmark project. I worked with projects around the world for the last 35 years. They have one of the top architectural firms in the country. The amount of money they're prepared to invest in the project is stunning. The quality of the materials are outstanding. I think all those are efforts to try to blend into, not impose, with the quality of life here. So I would encourage the board and the neighbors to really be a community with Villanova. Pick specific actions, not just limitations, that can address your concerns like traffic, safety, community impact. All of those things affect their students and the quality of what they represent to people coming here as well. So thank you very much for your consideration.
Okay, I want to thank Villanova for his presentation. I want to thank the neighbors for their comments, and we'll be discussing this all next year. Thank you. No, I don't.
Yeah, don't cut it off. You know what?
Sorry, did you already cut it off?
All right, you're the last one.
Roberta Winters. I live in Garrett Hill, 326 Williams Road. My concern is for the long-term impact on revenue in our township as the institutional footprints of nonprofits continue to increase. I think, having been on many budget meetings in the school district and in the township, the more of our properties that go into nonprofit status, the smaller our tax base becomes, so that we as taxpayers continue to pay more as our institutions continue to grow. So I would hope that as we look to increasing the footprint of our nonprofits, that we also look for ways in which they might, in fact, increase the revenue that we as township people need to maintain our services, which they too are entitled to obtain. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Bill, I want to thank all the members of the 7th Ward for coming out tonight. There are at least 50 out tonight, so thank you for coming out in support of this.
Okay. All right, personnel administration is off the agenda. No, we're just going to go right on. We got motions to pass, so let's go to Public Works, and we'll just go right through these. They're all standard motions, so we can just do them in short order. Jim? A is off the agenda, yes. Jim? Okay. Skip the agenda. You have the agenda? Just Just read it off the agenda. The first resolution is authorizing the master casting agreement with the Pennsylvania Department of Transportation.
Yes, I have it. There was a small modification I asked our manager to add to the resolution, and unfortunately, I left it in my office.
Bob, do you have any recollection of what he's...
I have it here.
Oh, okay. The casting agreement, Jim, is a standard agreement.
The purpose of the casting resolution is to allow the township to take advantage of the arrangement that PennDOT has with a contractor to replace the castings, which are basically the manholes and other cast iron implements in our on state roads. So the resolution would allow the township to enter into an agreement with PennDOT for the purpose of allowing PennDOT to replace those castings. The only change I wanted to make was in the second whereas clause that whereas in the course of the Commonwealth's projects, certain utility castings may require adjustment and/or replacement. I wanted to say certain utility castings owned by the township on Commonwealth roads.
Fine. Is that acceptable to the solicitor? Can I have a motion to that effect, Jim?
So I so move that we amend the second paragraph that way, and then if that's acceptable, we...
Can we have a second on his amendment?
Second.
All in favor of the amendment?
I have a question.
Question.
Bob, in the background note, it identified the current balance. Do we have a forecast of how much we anticipate this to cost this year? How much of that balance are we anticipating using?
I think that will determine based on the roads that PennDOT plans to do this year. Steve, if you want to just add to anything to that.
Yes, Commissioner Higgins, on PennDOT's list is Bryn Mawr Avenue in its full length within the township and Conestoga Road within its full length in the township. And in the most cases, PennDOT will mill the street, so our manholes will be at the proper grade. This is really to adjust any manholes that are currently low or need replacing. We took a look at both roads, and it's hard to tell because we don't know their full limits of paving yet because they haven't awarded the contract. But I think we would be conservative on the high side if we said there might be 10 manholes that have to be adjusted.
And what does that multiply out to be, Steve?
4,000.
So you're thinking maybe $4,000 or $5,000 out of the 90,000?
Right. I think it's 484 per manhole.
Okay.
So it would be in the $5,000 range.
It's 5% of the fund.
And we would still, it would still follow the purchase order processing. I would still have to submit a purchase order to get approved and go through that route.
All right, Jim, can I have a motion instead of amendment? Can you just give me a motion with that change? Just make a motion to approve with that
I move
change.
that we approve the resolution with that change.
Okay, second?
I'll second that.
Any commissioner comment? Public comment? All those in favor? Aye. Passes 7-0.
Next resolution.
That's, number C is off the agenda.
2012-14?
Yes, that's off the agenda.
Manager pulled it.
The next resolution is for the installation of a sidewalk, for the design of the construction and installation of a sidewalk on Chamonix Road from the
St. David's train station to the entrance.
1,100 linear feet of sidewalk on Chamonix Road for a not-to-exceed fee of $24,000.
Will you make that motion?
And the engineering would be done by Gilmore and Associates, so I so move.
Second?
I'll second that.
Any comment?
Yeah, I have a few questions. I guess Dave or Steve or Bob, is this the full cost of your engineering services through the entire project, or are there other costs coming downstream?
This is for the design, the survey and design of the project.
Once the project goes out to bid and it goes into construction, if the board would elect to have Gilmore and Associates out there doing field inspection, those would be additional costs.
Ballpark?
Commissioner Higgins, that's actually in their agreement, they show that, and I marked up contract agreement where
That's
the
the
actual...
that's the $11,000?
Correct. So I'm just asking for design, because at the time, if you did decide to go through with the project, we would address that if we would do that in-house or possibly with Gilmore. But I just wanted to be able to show there's a possible cost there if we go out of house with inspections.
Okay. And then, Bob, are there other costs that will be billed to Eastern other than these costs potentially?
Yes, one of the things that, I'm glad you make the point, is to go back and actually look at some reimbursement, because I believe with the money that John was able to get from Eastern and the board had approved, is to go back to some of the solicitor's expenses as well as some of the engineering costs to be able to go back and, I believe, recoup that. So that's something that I will discuss with John, because I believe that would fall within the purview, as the board had set out there, where it would be a net balance to the township of zero, where it'd break even. So I think this would be something that would be appropriate for us to look at and go back and be able to recoup those costs, which I think would be
Do
valid.
you or Bill have a full accounting of time and effort for this project?
We're going to have to go back and look at, we know that with John's time, we should be able to come up the determination based on Dan Malloy's time, and that may be a little tough to be able to look at that, but that's something we want to be able to go back to and try to put some number to that we'll be able to bring back to the board as well. And that's something we'll work with finance as well as.
So we're burning
solicitor.
through 24,000, potentially 11,000, and more on top of that, and Eastern has limited their contribution to $80,000. So
That's what's been set aside in the,
it's more than been set aside.
yeah. Right.
Yeah,
That's what they've agreed to.
80,000.
Do we have a
What it
sense of the
says-
cost of the
It
construction?
says Eastern shall not be responsible for any further funding.
Right.
That's a limit to me.
It's 80,000.
Yeah. So that's without any construction costs.
Correct.
So what was positioned as a free sidewalk doesn't look like it's going to be free to me.
No, wait a minute. How are you getting from 24,000 engineering and 11,000 construction estimate to $80,000?
Look,
If
the
you
fact,
go,
the fact of the matter is that Eastern has agreed to spend $80,000. If we don't have enough money to build the sidewalk, I think a majority of Board of Commissioners in favor of the sidewalk, we'll find a way to do it. Okay?
I don't know about that, and
Yeah, I don't know about that. I have a
I
question.
I also remember from previous conversations, and
Yeah.
I think Nick probably left for the night.
Kevin, you're not in
But-
favor of the sidewalk, so we're not
Can
going
you
to
let me
debate
finish,
this all
Bill?
night.
Can you let me finish? I have one last comment to make.
Fine.
And I recall from previous discussions with Nick and Eastern University that they were more than willing to make a cash contribution to the township in lieu of the construction. So it doesn't make a hell of a lot of sense to me to spend money on planning for something that you're not going to be able to fund to install. I think you ought to go back to them and talk about the cash contribution.
All right, can I have a motion? Do we have a motion?
Hang on.
Steve, just for the sake of my understanding, do we have a construction estimate?
Yeah, I mean, again, it's hard to come up with a good, solid number without having the field survey, but with what we have, the information we have, we think probably in the neighborhood of $85,000 to $86,000.
For everything?
Correct. For the that's a construction cost. So that would be beyond the design engineering costs.
1,100-foot sidewalk, $85,000?
No. Yes, well, it would be, it's sidewalk as well as curbing. Yeah. There's curbing in there as well. And there's probably, again, if you're familiar with the road, there's a lot of existing vegetation. There's arborvitaes and things of that nature that are probably going to have to get relocated. There's going to be some regrading done. So there's other items besides just the actual concrete.
All right. Well, we're not there yet. This is just 24,000 plus a possible 11,000 in construction services.
Correct.
So
Now, actually, Commissioner Higgins, it would be, if you went forward, it's $24,000 for the design, possible 86 for construction, brings you up to 110. And then if you decided to go further with their inspections, it would be an additional 11,000 for 121,000.
Okay, I need some help with this one. We're looking at $35,000 in engineering costs on a project that's only going to cost $80,000. Something doesn't sound right to me, and I'm speaking as an engineer here. So I appreciate the quotation that we have from Gilmore and Associates, but is this really competitive? I mean, we're talking 1,100-foot sidewalk.
Right. I mean, I guess if I could just add, this is a not-to-exceed value, because again, since we don't have a plan, it's very difficult for us to say how much engineering is going to be involved here. Just from my windshield survey, I see there's some regrading that's going to happen. There's some relocation of landscaping that's going to have to occur, as well as my understanding, there may be some homeowners along this path that aren't necessarily in favor of the project, so we might have to work with them a little more closely than we would on a similar type project. So I just think there's a lot of elements that, there's a lot of variables in play. So I think there's a chance it can come in, well under 24,000. I just can't say until we actually have a plan put together. So again, it's not a lump sum. It's a not to exceed value.
Do I have a motion to approve this?
I have just one quick question. When we had an in-house engineer, is this the type of surface that our in-house engineer would have designed, or did we have our in-house engineer do this type of designing? Do you know?
It could have been available for them to be able to do.
Mm-hmm.
But again,
So when we move forward, thinking through this, our decision to have, the more design packages we pay for, we really should be keeping track of this and seeing if it makes sense for us to not to have an in-house engineer.
that would be something to look at, but also too, you need to determine when you look at stormwater issues in sidewalk design, where best is an in-house engineer used at than designing a sidewalk. But also, I think with what Steve and Dave have worked on here, I think it would be better to be able to say a not to exceed number than all of a sudden come in and say, well, here's $10,000 to design it, and by the way, now there's a change order for an extra additional $10,000. Because I think and I don't know if Dave explained it enough, but you look at a challenging area there because of large trees that are in the area there, whether or not you're going to have set-asides, where if those trees die in 4 or 5 years. But I don't think this is as straightforward where you're talking 1,100-foot sidewalk, a very easy, straightforward design.
One last question, Steve and Dave. What is your schedule? I didn't see any
Yeah, it did have a schedule.
timeline in here.
Yeah. It's set
Commissioner,
out here.
Yeah, Commissioner Higgins, if the board awarded this, we would provide a purchase order to Gilmore Associates, let them begin immediately on the design, and it's accounted for the capital improvement plan, and then we would move on to design and prepare bidding documents, come back to the board, see if they would wish to go to bid, award that. If so, bid it, award the contract, and it looks like it would be spring, summer when that would all take place.
Can you make a motion? I mean, the fact of the matter is that, Eastern agreed to pay $60,000 for this sidewalk. We've held it up for 5 years. Okay, this board held it up for 5 years, and then Eastern agreed to pay $80,000. That was for a sidewalk. Now we're going to put in curb. It's going to cost us more money. So they're giving us $80,000, and we should be committed to put this sidewalk in. If it costs more money, it costs more money. But we've taken a long time. This sidewalk is needed from the St. David's train station to Eastern. These people are walking in the street. So let's make the motion. Let's move forward. Then when we get to bids, then you can decide whether you want to put in curb or not, or whether you want to come up with the extra money. But we got to keep moving forward. This thing has been held up for 5 years now.
It is needed, and it will definitely improve the safety.
We'll make the motion.
I move that we authorize Gilmore and Associates to enter into a contract with Gilmore Associates for the sum of not to exceed $24,000 for the Chamonix Road sidewalk.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, any comment? Public comment?
John DeGina, 223 Chamonix Road.
Regarding the costs, I just completed a 300-foot-long dam on our property up in northeast Pennsylvania, put up a brand-new 6,000 square foot, very detailed home. These costs are not out of line. And we were assured, Jim, you were there at one of those meetings where we were assured by Mr. Spengler, this would not cost the township any money. It's for free.
Yeah.
Now
that was 5 years ago before everybody held it up.
Bill, it hasn't gone that much. Nobody wants it
okay.
except you.
Fine.
Fine. I don't want to get into that.
Fine.
We've gone through that
That's
already.
right. We're not debating that.
We're not debating that. But those costs are not out of line. It wouldn't be out of line a few years ago. This was, this is going to be over $120,000.
That's because we added curb.
And that's what it should have been in the first place. The issue way back when also was
we got it.
They were only.
We're not going to debate the need for the sidewalk.
Well, we're not debating
We're
that.
talking about a cost right here. That's all we're talking
Exactly.
about. Okay. And it's not out of line. You agree. Thank you.
Does cost? Oh, yeah, they were not out of line.
Thank you very much. I
But the
appreciate
one
your comment.
cost that haven't been put in yet is what Bob mentioned earlier, and that's all of the upfront costs that occurred over the past few years. The police surveys, I'm not going to go into this, but there's about 6 or 7 different projects that were there.
We've eaten those costs, okay?
We have to get those costs.
No, we've eaten those. Thank you.
Right.
Thank you.
Right.
Any other comment? All right, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? Opposed. The motion passes.
Another comment. You didn't take the other
Motion
comment.
passes 4-2. Jim, you got to be quicker.
Well, that's the worst bit of wheeling dealing you've done yet.
You're up to mic every night here.
Bill,
okay?
you have been talking down this
Let's go.
township for 4 years, to my
Thank you.
observation.
Jim, thank you. You're out of order. Please
We
sit
want
down.
transparency, and we want
Okay.
it starting now.
I appreciate it. Thank you. Jim, next item.
You just clarify, I think you said the vote was 4-2. Did somebody not vote?
Oh, 5-2. 5-2. I'm sorry.
The next item is a resolution to award a contract for professional services, again, to Gilmore and Associates in the amount of $28,000.
What happened to Lantoga Road Sewer?
That's where I am. That's where I am. For the replacement of the Lantoga Square
Okay.
sewers.
All right.
So I'll move the resolution.
Second? Do I have a second?
Second.
Any commissioner comment? Public comment?
Well, I have one quick question. I'm just a little perplexed at the, so this is to repair or rehab about 700 linear feet. And then in about 2 items, we're going to be talking about Midland, which is to repair or rehab about over 1,100 linear feet. And the design for this one is going to cost not to exceed $28,000. And the design for that one is going to cost not to exceed $18,000. So could you just, is there some reason, is one more complicated than the other or something
Yeah.
like?
I had the same thought, and I talked to my sewer engineer about this. Basically, this project, the Lantoga project, the existing sanitary line is not located in the middle of the road. It's located behind the curb line. It's near some existing trees. It's going to be a difficult design, and we're going to have to do some analysis as to whether we're going to go that route or actually move the line out into the cartway of the roadway. So this is a very complex engineering design by comparison to the Midland design, because the Midland is right in the middle of the road, and it's a very simplistic engineering exercise. So that's what the differential is between the two
Okay,
projects.
thank you.
Move in second. Any other comment? Public comment? All those in favor?
Aye.
Pass 7-0.
The next item is design contract for the decommissioning of the Courtney Lane Pump Station. And this is to, again, award a contract to Gilmore and Associates for the fixed fee of $29,000. I'll move the resolution.
Second?
Second.
Comment?
I have a question. Steve, when you and I spoke about this quite a while ago,
you had determined that we hadn't yet gotten the easements we need to connect to Wooten Road, so what's the status of that?
Commissioner Nagel, there was in the file, I think this project's been hanging around for a few years, and I did look in the file, and what we saw, there was some preliminary design done. I don't know that it was the most advantageous route for rerouting the sewer, and there were no easements obtained at the time. So looking at that and knowing that we need, there was also no DEP approval because we're changing the sewage flow from one basin to the other. It still all ends up at the Philadelphia treatment plant, but this changed our flows through the Springfield trunk line. We had to get approval for that. So what was done before, I'll say, was very preliminary. After looking at all that, I requested the permission to go to Gilmore to get a project cost for them to do the full design, including obtaining the approvals, surveying the area, running that through, providing the easement documentation. I will, I would address the residents requesting the easements. They'll provide the documentation, the survey. So staff would take care of contacting the residents and final design by Gilmore.
Thank you, Steve.
Public comment? All those in favor?
Aye.
Passes 7-0.
The next item is the replacement of the sanitary sewer on Midland Avenue. And this is a contract for professional services, again, to Gilmore and Associates in the amount of fixed fee of $18,000. I will move the resolution.
Second.
Any commissioner comment? Public comment? All those in favor?
Aye.
Passes 7-0.
The next item is replacement of comfort stations at Cowan Field, Emlyn Tennell Park, and Clem McCrone Park. This would authorize the receipt of bids for the installation of 3 new comfort stations at those parks. I move the resolution.
Second.
Commissioner comment?
Bob, just to clarify, if we were to build at Emlyn Tennell, it would be on the piece of township property that it kind of adjoins.
That's correct. If it was looked at, it would be on township property.
Also, Bob, the Cowan's funded through a state DEP grant.
That's correct.
I don't remember that we budgeted for the other 2, so.
We did not, and what we would look at is because, we've heard the need for those buildings, that we would look at a public-private partnership as part of those to get those accomplished. And by having these bids go out, being able to have fixed costs, it's going to be a lot easier for us to be able to go out and try to find a partner with the township to be able to get these accomplished.
Public comment? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes 7-0.
The last item is a resolution authorizing the township to receive proposals for the investigation of imposition of a stormwater utility to pay the cost of a new installation, repair installation, replacement of a new conveyance and management system for our stormwater in the township.
You so move?
I move the resolution.
Second?
I had a question. Did we
Wait,
ever get the...
second?
I second it.
Okay, questions?
Did we get the unsolicited proposal, for lack of a better way of describing it, from the organization that was...
No, that from AMEC we did not. They had contacted us after the board meeting where we put that out, and I asked them to wait so that if we did go to RFP, it would be best just to get everybody's at one time.
Okay. Public comment?
Well, I have one comment. My opinion, this is premature. There's a lot of work that has to be done on the township side. Before by township, I mean people, citizens, and staff, not just staff or not just commissioners. But we need a lot of input, and we should be directing consultants more than in this case. I think it's premature. We're just too open-ended at this point. We're going to get a document that takes us in a direction, and in my opinion, we should be telling the consultants more about what we want to do. So I intend to vote against it.
Is this an RFP? It'll just be a general RFP?
Well, actually, we have two. I'm sorry.
If I may, this is just actually looking for qualifications of firms.
Okay.
So what we'd be doing is looking at firms that have experience in being able to do this. There's no cost to the township to be able to do this, and I think this may address the issue that Don has in regards to at a point of having a firm that has the qualifications and experience, and then having the board direct what to be looked at, which then they would formulate what this would actually look like. So actually what we're looking for now is qualifications of the firms that have experience to be able to do this.
Can I ask a clarifying question then, Bob? And I don't know if it's a typo, whether it matters, if I'm just caught up in a semantic issue, but the agenda said authorization for RFQs, which could be interpreted what you just described as request for qualifications, whereas the resolution says, I think, says RFP.
Okay.
That was my mistake, Commissioner.
Which is correct.
The RFQ, request for qualifications.
So the resolution where it says RFP should be RFQ?
That's correct.
All right, we'll make that change. Well, any public comment? Jim, can you make a motion with that change?
Well, Don, do you feel any more positive about this after you heard the
Yes,
township
as a matter
manager?
of fact, I do.
Yeah,
I mean, I was reading RFP, so.
Okay.
Okay. All right, so you'll make
It doesn't sound like it restricts us in any way or forces us in any
you'll
direction.
make the motion with
I move the
RFQ.
I
With
move-
RFQ.
Yes, changing the word to request for qualifications.
Second?
I'll second the amendment.
All those in favor? Aye.
Aye. Any
Finance and
opposed?
audit? John? What's that? I did, 7-0. Oh, John wasn't here, okay. 6-0, one abstention.
All right.
6-0,
We have
one
schedules of
abstention.
bills payable disbursement list 2012-2A. I move to approve this scheduled bills payable. It's in the amount of $1,331,511.60. The payments have been reviewed by respective department heads and approved through the township purchase order process, and then verified and processed by the finance department.
Second?
Please note my recusal on the items involving office basics.
I have a
I'll
question
second it.
I have a question for Bill or Tammy. I assume the $730 for Phillies tickets is for one of the rec programs during the summer?
It is our annual summer trip to see the Phillies down at Citizens Bank, and this trip has actually sold out traditionally for, I guess I'd say probably about the last 5 years, obviously because the Phillies are doing so great. But it would be covered in its totality by fees for the program.
Kevin, it's sold out. Looks like we're not going.
I want to go.
There's no tickets
But I'm
left.
suffering a lot of pain because of the Phillies.
Any other comment, commissioners? Public comment? All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Motion passes 6-0.
I have Resolution 2012-23 acknowledging the deposit and accounting requirements of the remaining funds from the obsolete Police Athletic League of Radnor Township. I don't know if any staff comment. Bill,
You
do you
wanna
want
make
to
the
comment on
motion
this? Oh, yeah, I'll move to approve.
Second?
Resolution 2012-23.
Second.
Second? Jim? All right. Commissioner comment?
Superintendent?
Yes, Commissioner, when I got here, one of the things I looked at was this Police Athletic League fund that we have, and I was receiving monthly bank statements, but the fund is, even though the fund is in the bank right now, we haven't had a Police Athletic League in a number of years, since the 90s. There's close to $17,000 in this account. So I've been working with the finance director and Mr. Rice regarding what we could do to channel this money back into the township. Subsequent to that, we received a letter that if we don't do something with these funds by April, it's going to be turned into the state. So what we're going to do is get these funds from the bank, come up with another, I guess, program where we can channel this money into some programs that Tammy has in the form of a scholarship for student activities or athletic activities.
So Bill, we didn't get authorization from the Police Athletic League. This is just essentially because they're inactive, it's kind of abandoned property, and the bank sends us a letter saying...
Yes, yeah. Kevin, we receive, some of the officers are actually on the signature cards, and prior
You say
to-
some of our police officers?
Yes,
Okay.
yes. So they were getting the statements, and because of lack of activity, it used to be, I think, 10 years, and now it's 7 years, lack of activity, you get this form that it's...
Well, John, if that's just in the sheet notice, go out and make a withdrawal of $1.
Well, unclaimed, well, it still has to be dealt with. So
Yeah.
it's been sitting there, and
Well, at least it takes the time pressure off.
we contacted the bank, and it would go back to the state in April. It's going to be, assuming the board approves this, it was collected for youth athletics. As long as it's used for the same purpose, then we would rather have it used because it was collected in Radnor Township. But I attempted to contact a couple attorneys and some other people that were involved in this in the 80s. It goes back that far. And no one has any records. There's been no activity. There's been no meetings. So we're stepping in and taking the money and using it for what it was originally
and
set aside for.
I assume because you're asking us to do this, this is all, legal. Is there anything we need to do in case they come out of the woodworks to make a claim, or we'll have the resolution, somebody will be able to go find it, but are they able to make a claim for, future interest or anything like that?
No,
in the absence of a written agreement?
Whoever was involved in the PAL group, and I'm not sure whether they were incorporated, I think they signed up with a national organization, and that's all they did. There's some rules and regulations in an old file that was given to me. But as long as we're using it for the same purpose for youth athletics, then I don't see that there's any liability from PAL. The people that donated the money donated it for this particular purpose, and that's what the chief's plan is.
I just want to react to your choice of wording for a second, John. Since cash is fungible, and you're saying we're using it for youth athletics, does Bill in any way have to document, track, or specifically assign this money to a specific program so that there's an audit trail?
Yeah, I think that's been the plan. There will be a specific athletic program. My only concern was that it didn't end up in the general fund and disappear because of the way it was collected at the time. And that's the commitment from the chief, and Bob and I had the same conversation, and Bill and I have been talking about it also. As long as we can show where it went, then I think this is a good thing for the township. It's found money.
Any public comment?
Oh, wait a minute. Just one thing, I'd like to make sure you attach a copy of whatever the rules are so it's in the public record. So.
Yeah, we have bylaws.
Right.
We have a file.
Just
on
wanted
it.
to make sure it's in there with everything else.
Public comment? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes 7-0.
No further report.
Public safety?
First, I will move to accept the Staff Traffic Committee meeting minutes of January 17th, 2012.
Second?
Second.
Commissioner comment? Public comment? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Passes 7-0.
Next, I move to approve Resolution 2012-12, approving the purchase of 3 federal Signal Valor light bars with smart siren and speaker, and I think we need a little explanation.
Okay, let's get a second.
Second.
Okay. Chief?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. The capital budget allotted $117,000 for the purchase of 3 new vehicles this year under capital. Those vehicles were purchased under the state contract. This money is for the light bar package that has to equip those 3 vehicles. It's $7,500, which is within that $117,000 original amount.
$7,500 for all 3 of them, not each.
Not each. That's complete, done.
Bill, for the uneducated in the group, what's the difference between these lights and siren and the standard siren that would come with it?
Well, these are new vehicles, and these 3 vehicles that are coming, it's the Ford Interceptors. Most of it is going to be equipped with the lights and the sirens and everything like this. This is in addition to that, which is not interchangeable with some of the vehicles we have now.
Any public comment? All those in favor? Aye. Passes 7-0. That's.
Oh, I have one more item for public safety. I just want to announce that the Public Safety Subcommittee of this board will be meeting on Tuesday, February 28th at 7 p.m. to address one issue, and that is the deer control in our township. The meeting will be not in this room, but the Windsor room of the library. That's Tuesday, February 28th, 7 p.m. in the Windsor Room, and we'll hear a presentation of some of the research that our police staff has done on this issue and possible solutions.
Thank you. Community Development, Don?
Sure. I move the approval of Certificate of Appropriateness for HARB 2012-03 for 219 Poplar Avenue, addition and renovation.
Second.
Commissioner comment? Public comment? All those in favor?
Aye.
Passes 7-0.
So for this item, John Rice, you're looking to move the introduction of the ordinance for item number O,
Correct.
or item lettered O. I move the introduction of ordinance for Radnor Township, Delaware County, amending 120 bathing places, public, Article 3 swimming pools.
Second.
Commissioner comment?
Yeah, I just had a question for John. John, what's the change and why is it needed?
I'm going to defer to Kevin, because this, I think, came from Larry to Kevin to me. I think there's some certification that is required now, Kevin.
This is intended to bring consistency between our regulations and the state regulations. Most of the public bathing facilities, the public pools, are already doing this. We do have a few out there that are not, so we thought it would be best for the health and safety of the residents to make our ordinance consistent with the state requirements.
How are we inconsistent and what is this correcting?
Right now, they're not, my understanding is lifeguards required at the wading pools for toddlers. So this would then make that a mandate for lifeguards to be present at those pools.
Any public comment? All those in favor? Aye. Passes 7-0.
And I'll move the approval of Resolution 2012-20, approving the preliminary/final plans for KMO 361 Realty Associates.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any public comment? All those in favor?
Well, wait a minute.
Good evening, George Brosman, representing the applicant. We had a question on item number 5 of the resolution we would like to discuss. This is a requirement regarding replacement of streetlight standards. This hadn't come up at the Planning Commission. It's my understanding that these are the public streetlights that are located on Lancaster Avenue. We're not entirely comfortable with the language as it is written. We would like to propose some more specific language. We don't think the streetlights are our responsibility, but we're proposing some language that we would make a contribution to the township if the township wants to replace those lights. So I was proposing language to say, for number 5, the applicant shall reimburse the township with a cash contribution not to exceed $10,000 towards replacement of streetlight standards fronting on Lancaster Avenue located in front of the property. We would ask your consideration of that amendment.
Steve?
That would be acceptable, Commissioner. That's
Okay.
acceptable.
Is 10,000 a fully loaded cost for 4 streetlights, $2,500 a piece?
That would be to be able to replace the Cobra heads, not necessarily the poles, but the Cobra head light fixtures along there.
Are the light fixtures aging and in need of repair?
They are aging. This would update them. This would modernize them.
When did this item 5 get put in? Was this at our last meeting?
No, they added that since our
Okay.
last meeting, which is tough to do. but- Okay. Let's take the 10,000 and go home.
Okay.
All right. All right, can I have, Don, can I have a new motion with the $10,000?
Yeah,
number 5?
a motion that we amend item number 5 to indicate that the township would accept a $10,000 contribution toward that end, consistent with the applicant's wording.
Second?
Second, and I have a comment.
Go ahead.
At the last meeting, when the Luella Mansion project came up, our township manager is not in the room right now. Well, I'll speak to the engineering people. We talked about the confusion that exists when we label a plan as preliminary and final, combination. And I pointed out that in our subdivision and land development code, we have distinct and discrete treatment of a preliminary plan and a final plan. So my question is this. Are are we going to change our policy on the way we receive plans in the future so we don't get this confusion anymore, that a plan, when it first comes in, is a preliminary plan? When it goes through the process of approval from our different boards, including the Planning Commission, then the applicant will convert it to a final plan. Are we going to fix that confusion?
Well, I think as it stands right now, we're going to accept plans as preliminary plans. If they come in as preliminary/final, as this one did, they're going to need to seek a waiver from that bullet line. They have to seek a waiver as this applicant has done. Condition number 8 of this resolution acknowledges that you'll be granting them a waiver from that saldo section. So
you're going to continue to have this label, preliminary final?
If the applicant would like to come in as a preliminary/final plan, they may, but they're going to have to seek a waiver from that section. And, the Planning Commission has the ability to not recommend that waiver, and similarly, you have the ability to not grant that waiver and force them to go through the process in a two-step process.
It just depends on the magnitude of the project. If it's a simple project, we can do a preliminary final if everybody agrees, instead of taking all this extra time. I mean, you can take these people after May if you want.
Is your concern, Jim, the slash or the process? Because I thought some was terminology.
It's a confusing label, but apparently everybody else is clear, and I'm the only one confused by it.
I'm not in agreement. I would be more comfortable if it said preliminary and final, personally.
I'm not in agreement
you were
with-
using. I kind of agree, preliminary.
Hang on.
Yeah.
This is in our zoning code. This is chapter 255 that requires separate preliminary and final
That's actually
hearings.
saldo, yeah,
Saldo,
subdivision land
it's in the
development.
saldo code 255. So, and part of that is there's minimal times before you can have your hearing. So the public process has to be respected. And certainly, when we look at Villanova, I'm not going to even. I'll scream like you've never heard me
No, well,
scream.
John, that's no way would that happen.
If we try to do a fast track
No,
on
John, that
something
would not
complex,
happen.
I won't accept it. On something like this, it's probably reasonable as long as the Planning Commission is waived and we've waived.
All
fine.
right, I'd be happy if we
Yeah.
just say preliminary and final in the future, if that's the shortcut
If
that
we
you
waive
want
it,
to.
if we waive it.
Correct, right.
Okay. Instead of preliminary / just preliminary and final, we're doing both together if the Planning Commission and the Commissioners waive it.
Okay, so it shall be labeled as preliminary and final as opposed to preliminary/final.
Thank you. Yes,
Yes.
sorry.
All right. Any other Commissioner comment? Any other Commissioner comment? Any public comment?
I'm Jim Schneller. I live in St. David's Park.
Now,
And-
wait a minute. Now, you said you moved to another apartment. Where do you live now? Where do you live?
Brinfield.
All right, thank you.
And I tried to raise these objections last time. However, if I could quickly say that I'm not so sure the stacking requirement has been met here. There's strict stacking requirements stated in the law. You have a parking lot that is looking at new improvements on the other side of the lot, and the actual location is eating up about 30 parking spaces. We need to have the comforts we're used to. We like our property values.
Well, this
Even our
has been
landlords.
reviewed by our staff, and there is proper parking.
This is why I decided to stand up.
Well,
Because if you're
it's already
eliminating,
been reviewed. It's not for discussion. It's already done. They have enough parking here.
yes, however, if you're going to be toying around with preliminary and final, you're missing a step. And this is a good example, because if these folks are also looking at a new pad on the other side of the lot, there's been a lot of big issues, and if the public loses time to think and digest it, where are you going to delineate when a plan becomes preliminary and final? It's going to become discretionary for the developers, probably, when they feel like doing it.
We have to approve it. The Planning Commission has to approve it. We have to approve it. Thank you, Jim.
I'd ask that you stick to Chapter 255 until you can come up with some concrete amendment to the law. And I did stand to ask that you take a look at the stacking before you approve this.
Thank you.
I almost can't believe I'm going to say this, but I agree with Jim. I think this is a very slippery slope. I think that it's been laid out in our ordinances, the way things unfold. I think that over the years, everybody's grown to expect that there's a preliminary plan and a final plan, and each has their little steps through which you go. If you have a preliminary plan, you address certain things. If you have a final plan, you address those things as well as others. This combination is a very slippery slope, and we're going to get a lot of sloppy development. Thank you.
Any other comment? All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes 7-0.
And for item R, I'll open it to someone else to make a motion.
All right, somebody else want to make a motion? For what? How about Q? How about Q, Don?
Very well. I move the resolution of approval of resolution. Thank you. I move the approval of resolution 2012-21 granting Rite Aid Corporation reverse subdivision and final land development approval.
Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Commissioner comment? Public comment?
Commissioner Spengler, just on this, there's one edit to this resolution under the now therefore clause before paragraph 1, the last line where it says, subject to the following preliminary plan approval conditions, that should be final plan approval conditions.
Just can't get those words right. Down.
This is final.
Yes. Got it.
And this had a preliminary, as I recall. Yes.
This came through without asking for the waiver, without granting the waiver, but doing the 2 steps.
Jim Schneller, I understand it's a final plan, but I did ask before, and I wanted to reemphasize, that was actually at the final public participation, where I mentioned this. But Rite Aid has benefited from many waivers and other grants of your understanding. And they seem to have reneged on any wishes to improve on that stretch of Lancaster Pike. There's a very simple example to take a look at here. We were told that there were curbs needed, any small improvement would need it, all kinds of engineering. If you look at the CVS, and unfortunately MAB has left town, if you look at that, they just laid a sidewalk from the car wash up to the old post office. They did not need curbs. They did a beautiful job. And the engineering was probably about $2,000. Now, could Rite Aid please put in a couple trees in front of Carson's Paint, in front of Joe's, perk up the block a little bit. You've put in those great street lights up to the Bank of America, and I ask that something can be done to make that block pretty. Thank you.
Public comment? All in favor? Aye. Anyone opposed? Passes 7-0.
And for item R,
Okay, I'll go ahead and move to approve resolution number 2012-22, approving the final plans of CF Holloway and Company to convert an existing apartment building into 12 condominium units. Now, well, first, can we have a second?
Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Let me just try and recap where we are, because I'm a little confused myself about this.
Excuse me, would you note for the record Mr. Spengler has recused himself?
I will note that President Spengler has recused himself as he has a conflict of interest. And he has left the room. Now, last month, we granted what I thought was preliminary approval with a long list of conditions that are reflected or memorialized in this resolution, which I view as final approval. First of all, is that right? Is that?
Yes.
Okay.
What happened last month is you had a preliminary plan approval resolution with the conditions that were hashed out that night at the meeting. And the board also approved that night the applicant coming back for final tonight, because the request, much like St. David's and the other projects that have come through as preliminary/final, that was on all the plans of Luella. Your planning commission approved it as preliminary final. The Delaware County Planning Commission approved it as a final in their November 2010 review. So the recommendation from the staff was to do preliminary, the board approved that, and then the board authorized them to come back tonight for final. So so what you have tonight is some additional minor conditions, but basically the preliminary plan approval. I think Dave Lay, Gilmore did one other review, which is attached to this also, February 8th review letter.
And we, as a board, are committed to, or obliged to the conditions that we put in the preliminary approval last week, last month.
They're locked in.
So tonight, we're debating anything new that's come up, or if there's something that it has not been reflected in here or is improperly reflected in here, but we're not rehashing the issues that we...
Once the preliminary plan approval is granted, those conditions are locked in unless the applicant agrees to modify them.
Or unless the board has a change of heart. The board can just say, on the threshold of the consideration of the final plan, that it's changed its mind from
not
on
the
preliminary plan.
Not on a preliminary plan approval. Once a preliminary plan approval, we had some of this discussion at the last meeting, is where everything gets set in stone. And they have, and Section 508 of the MPC is, once preliminary plan approval is given, the applicant has the right to that approval and has the right to vest that approval for 5 years against any changes in ordinances. So a final plan approval then is merely a cleanup, finalizing the plans to be signed, development agreements to memorialize, the other things that need to go in terms of construction. So you cannot change your preliminary plan approval conditions unless the applicant agrees.
Well, but you're saying we have no power to reverse our preliminary plan approval.
Not unless the applicant agrees. I mean, that's in case law, Commissioner Higgins, that has been the law.
I'm learning.
Yeah.
It's been...
And I know there's been some confusion with the way plans have been submitted and received by the township, and we're, you know, it's if someone wants to file a preliminary and final, they need to be filing also a waiver request, which the developers, quite frankly, haven't done that, and it's been sloppy because of that reason. But we need to pick it up at the Planning Commission level also to make sure, you know, what that Planning Commission is acting on. Major project like Villanova, you would never give preliminary/final, preliminary and final, something like that. But a lot of projects don't warrant the two steps. If it gets vetted at preliminary plan approval, you've pretty much vetted it, and you have to lock in your conditions at that stage.
Well, with that as background and parameters, do we have commissioner comment?
Yeah, I'm going to vote against it for the same reason. In my opinion, we're making a mistake on how we're interpreting the roof. That's causing problems, and it's making the garage, in my opinion, bigger than desirable, and also some undesirable elements to the garage. In my opinion, it would be better to interpret the roof to be impervious, and that would, I don't think it would scuttle the project, but I think it would change some of the attributes of the project and improve the project.
Well, I agree with Commissioner Curley that relatively technical reason to object to it, but I think it's proper. But as I said at the January 23rd meeting, my more fundamental objection to it is that I don't think the plan, the construction of this underground garage and the resulting change to the viewscape and the topography on Luella Court and the adverse impact it will have on the neighbors meets the requirements of the ordinance that we have that established the Luella Court Historic District. And I refer the board, my fellow commissioners, to chapter 178 of our general legislation, and I cited this last time. The Luella Courts District's overall development pattern is a prominent, focal, large estate building in the center of a ring of smaller homes, sharing a particular range of scale with a central boulevard circulation pattern leading up to the middle of the front facade of the focal building. And then this is 178-7, goes on to cover what we should be looking for when we evaluate changes to the Luella Court Historic District. And that is in F2 and F7, we are to preserve the overall relationship amongst the buildings within each district's development pattern. And we should preserve the compatibility with surrounding buildings in each district. And I think this project, as good it is from the standpoint of the developer, and as good an effort as he has made to adjust his plans with help of counsel and his architect and his landscape architect and his engineer and his, I don't know if you had an arborist in this as well, but I still think that we're falling short, and we have people here who have tremendous investment in their homes and their neighborhood and their families and their children and the environment that they're living in, and we're letting them down if we approve this. Thank you.
Any other commissioner comment? I do have one thing I'd just like to inquire about. It was brought to our attention through an email that there was a comment or note added to one of the plans mentioning covering the west porch that had not been in the plan before, or enclosing, enclosing. So I just wanted to clarify, I didn't see that those notes except for this email. So if that did happen, can we hear the circumstances and whatnot?
Sure. So that note was added. It was discussed in front of this board that porch would be closed. And actually, with respect to that email, this applicant went back in front of the HARB at this board's direction to discuss the west side of the building and the stairs that attach to that porch, at which point full discussion was made about that side, that those stairs would be only ornamental. They would serve no purpose for entrance because the porch would be closed. If that porch would remain open, those steps would serve a viable purpose. That was at the specific direction of this board to return to HARB to discuss that side of the building and those stairs. You can go back and watch any meeting, and you'll hear Mr. Holloway address that porch will be closed. It's not changing the footprint. It's not changing anything with respect to our development for land development. It's closing in an existing porch.
Well, I do recall sending it back to talk about those stairs.
That attach that porch.
I just didn't know. I don't even know what that means, enclosing or the porch. What does that mean?
So right now, there's an existing porch and the stairs, like as you would walk up from ground level onto the porch. So there's an opening onto an open porch. They're stacked. It's not just one level. It's stacked. There's porches on every floor going up, like a balcony. So those are going to be enclosed.
Like enclosed with like drywall to make
it's going to be part of. It's going to be part of the building, which it is part of building coverage on the plans. And that was a comment from the township to make that part of the building. That was a comment from David Lay. That's by definition in the township code, building, and it needs to be included in our building calculations, which was done, again, at this board's recommendation and at the engineer's recommendation. So we are not changing the footprint of the building in any way with respect to that end. So that is consistent. The plans have remained consistent. And the question came up, well, if you're going to do that, those stairs are going to go. And the neighbors wanted the stairs to remain. They thought that was an issue for HARB to address. So we were in front of this board, and they said, absolutely, that's something the HARB should address. And we went back and we discussed those stairs. But irrespective of that point, that is, if it's anything, a HARB issue.
Yes, so let me just clarify. Did HARB look at or see plans of an enclosure to add on? I mean, I presume that's to add on space to the interior.
enclose the porches to make the interior living space larger,
Bigger.
yes.
And so did Harb see that and opine on it?
I don't know if Harb saw those plans yet, but I know we are going back to Harb. So that will be part of the submission back to Harb.
So after you, if you got approval tonight, you would be going back to Harb to...
For a couple of things.
Okay.
So it's a window that has to be centered. Is that correct? What else is it, Cass? There's stairs to an old coal chute, and there's also the railing, which is now essentially just a 2x4 on the third floor, the materials that will be used on that railing.
And what is precipitating you having to go back to Harb? Because these changes are triggered under the ordinance, or because someone asked you to?
No, that we understand that to be what we need to do.
Required under the ordinance.
So we made it clear in front of Harb and at every step, if we're required to go back to Harb, we obviously will. You know, we're not trying to not go back where it's required, and we understand that by moving this window, centering the window, and addressing these exterior features, that's something that's under the Harb's purview.
And enclosing this porch, you understand to be something else you will bring before them?
We're not sure it's under Harb's purview, and we've actually explored it because it's been something that, again, we've discussed throughout the process. If it's required that it be presented to Harb, we're happy to present it to Harb. We're not sure it falls under construction or demolition. We don't believe it does. And I don't know if anybody, we would have to get that direction from the township. But again, that would be something we would encounter as we went through the process, as pulling building permits and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
But again, I think it's important to note that with respect to our land development application, and I have seen and heard some of the discussion, that does not affect our footprint or our application for land development. It's an issue that is handled after the fact, as if anybody was going through the process and came across something they felt needed to go in front of Harb, they would go through at that point in time of their development, presuming it didn't affect their overall footprint.
Okay. Is there any other commissioner comment?
I'll just make a brief comment. I think the applicant has done a lot to work with the neighborhood, but I still see that they're not happy. I also recognize that you can't always make everyone happy. For me personally, the township owns a number of historic properties that we're having a very difficult time maintaining. The Willows Mansion, the Willows Cottage, we've been working on the cottage for 4 years now, and it's still sitting empty with no apparent use at this time. So I appreciate, on one hand, that we have an investor who's willing to invest in trying to save a historic building, and and I also respect the neighborhood's desire to not only preserve the building, but preserve it to the greatest extent that they can. But as a commercial property owner myself, I just have to say that if we don't allow creative reuse of some of the historic properties in this township, we're going to see more torn down. We saw 2 torn down last year. We have a number of historic properties that the township owns that we may someday have to tear down because we can't find funding or the wherewithal to save them. So I'm going to support this approval because I feel that there's been a lot of compromise on the side of the applicant. I've seen a lot of compromise by the residents, but what I'm going to ask is that this is not the end of the conversation with the neighborhood, that you continue to do anything you can to soften the impact of this development on them. And Kaz, you've been before us many times. Anything you can do to make this better for them. It doesn't have to cost a lot of money to make it better. Sometimes it's just giving them an opportunity to be heard or to be constructive and be part of this, choosing the materials that you're choosing. I think it can be a win-win. I think you're going to have a beautiful property when it's done, but it's not going to be a beautiful property if you have 12 angry neighbors, because it's not going to be good for you from a business standpoint. It's not going to be good for them from a neighborhood standpoint. So anything you can do, it's not going to be written as a condition, because the conditions are written already, and they're already agreed to. But anything you can do from this point on to make it work, whether that's additional landscaping, a change in the landscaping, just trying to improve the look of that property when it's done, and the parking garage in particular. So, those are my comments.
Any other commissioners? Do we have any staff comment and public comment?
I am Susan Byrne from Luella Court. As somebody who's been to every one of these meetings, I can tell you that the porch was never discussed, enclosing the porch was never discussed with the HARB in a quorum, unless they had a quorum that without us being there, which they're not allowed to do. So the construction of that end of the building, there is a lobby that goes and a staircase that goes up, and that is like essentially the kitchen door to all the apartments on that wing. So really, that had to have been something that would have been known. Yes, we were concerned about the stone steps, and they said that they were going to leave the stone steps, but this never came into the plan. It seems to me, after having really, a bunch of us went over the difference between, because of Jim's question, how you get preliminary and final plans and why they're distinct. The handling of this is insane to me. It's insane. This is a big enough project. It is designed so that it goes back and forth between the boards, so that it's properly vetted, so that something like this doesn't happen between preliminary and final, because a lot of different things can go into these, these plans are so detailed that if it doesn't have the 30 to 90 days to go through and have people look at it, then all kinds of things can be stuck into these plans. As we've said from the beginning, we are not anti-development. We've seen this development coming since probably 2002. We just didn't see such dysfunction. It's unbelievable, that this is happening. Your job is not to ensure the future of this building. Your job is to follow code, as I understand it. You can interpret it any way you want, but I guarantee this is setting a dangerous precedent. This green roof and this project is setting a dangerous precedent for your ward and for your ward, where the smaller homes are. Because now you've just allowed a bigger footprint to go on all of these things. So I think it's dangerous. But this exact point, this was never in the plans. One of the things, Cass and I had a little discussion one time on the phone a couple months ago, and he said to me, "What do you want from me?" And I said, "I want the whole truth. We don't want a partial truth. We want the whole truth." And this is a perfect another example of a partial truth, which is, yeah, we talked to the HARB about the steps. We talked to them about the porch. And then the leap to we talked about it having been enclosed. Frankly, I'm not comfortable leaving all of these open-ended questions and loose ends to private conversations where they won't be vetted in rooms like this, because I just don't think the plan has worked so far. So I guess you can interpret anything any way you want, but code is code. And if you don't follow it here, how can you expect anyone to follow it for all the projects in your wards? Thank you.
Hello, Jim Schneller. I've tried to participate a little bit, and I do live close enough that I walk past the court and the mansion about 4 times a week or ride. And I want to ask you if the HARB has really taken such an active participation and this information has been percolated properly, why haven't the HARB decisions have conditions on them? The HARB is packed with experts. They're fascinated by the issue. Why haven't they put conditions one by one? The roof, the windows, because they haven't really done it. There's been details thrown at them whenever possible, but the HARB hasn't had the full-blown opportunity to review the matter. And this is Radnor's prominent and a jewel of a display of antiquity. And I'd have to say that dysfunctional is the real title of the process here. I don't want to be cynical, but Why couldn't Harb have been presented with this in the beginning? Were the original plans like this? Why was there kind of a puzzle-like approach? You don't have to approve tonight. And I object indeed to the statement that a final plan is unamendable, because you don't have to pass it. And then the developer has no choice. Can you cooperate with the Harb and get an expert to take a look at this? I don't want to sound like we need to have the preservation of Wayne Station all over again. However, you've got windows on the first floor that are dynamic. You've got entire situations, including a slate roof, that Radnor needs. And Harb is there for your advisement. I don't think Mr. Hollowell is against anything that's been suggested here. But somehow the process isn't working. So I'd ask you for anything you can do tonight to table the matter or to vote against it until some of these details can be worked out.
Is there any other public comment?
Thank you. I'm Michael Lefkowitz from 25 Luella Court, and as somebody downhill from this proposal, I wonder if you can tell me who I go to when the runoff from this thing, the township seems to be willing to pretend is a permeable structure, which I think the slightest bit of common sense tells you it isn't. When that starts coming down my driveway, who do I go to? Do I come back? Do I come to you? And where is our recourse for the sort of magical thinking that's going into this project? I think there's a similar problem with I think there's a nomenclature problem. Everybody's calling it an underground garage. In front of my house, it's not underground. It's, I don't know, 6, 8. We can't quite find out how many feet it's going to stick up. It's covered with dirt, but that's not underground. And that dirt is not going to absorb the runoff that comes off this thing, no matter how much we pretend it is. Has there been, I haven't seen the stormwater plan. Is there one? Is he going to be required to produce one? Or is that just going to be more magical thinking that water is just going to disappear into that dirt and kind of take care of itself? And just on a personal note, I've been appalled all night by the behavior of your president toward you, our elected representatives, and toward the people who come to this podium. It is inexcusable. It's embarrassing. Thank you.
Hi, Baron Gemmer, South Wayne Avenue. I'd like to quickly address the one Harb issue and then go on to another issue. The Harb ordinance says 178.5C, no principal building or accessory building shall be erected, altered by addition, or demolished in whole or in part. Related to what we're talking about here, certainly there's going to be some demolition on the railings, which will be in whole or in part. But more importantly, you say altered by addition, and Mr. Falcone is correct that the footprint of the building won't change because the porches are considered part of the footprint now. But the definition of addition is an extension or an increase in the footprint, floor area, or height of the principal building. This will increase the floor area. The definition of floor area goes from where the walls are. The walls are now moving out. So the floor area of this building will increase because the porches are not considered part of the floor area, and therefore it will fall under this. And as I think was mentioned before, I don't think you should trust the developer to go back to that. I think just as shade tree and other things, I think Harb issues all need to be resolved that a valid certificate of appropriateness is issued for whatever you approve in a final plan. Moving on from there, back to an issue that was brought up for the new bank at the St. David's Shopping Center. The code already does delineate what needs a preliminary and final. If under 255.12, it talks about that land development major subdivisions do need preliminary and do need final. It's minor subdivisions that don't. So the code already does differentiate. If you don't like that, change the code. But the problem comes in with saying, okay, then we're going to waive that. Well, let's look at what your rights are in terms of waiving provisions of the Saldo Code 255. and it talks about that you may grant a modification if the literal enforcement will exact undue hardship because of peculiar conditions pertaining to the land in question. How slowing or speeding up a process has anything to do with the land is, to be able to point to that, to say this is how we're going to waive it. This is typically a waiver for, we want a driveway here, or we want to have it service three things here because of 3 houses because of that. What you're talking about is waiving such an overarching provision, and it's so overarching in terms of saying we don't want to do a preliminary and a final, we just want to do one, or in this case to modify and not do the appropriate process for a final, which is what's going on here, and I'll get to that in a second. You have to actually issue waivers for 255.6 definitions, 255.12 the general provisions, 255.14 preliminary plan, 255.15 final plan. That's how overarching it is. That's what you're reaching into and saying, you don't need that. The process is here. You're not waiving some dimensional requirement. You're waiving a huge part of the process and the safeguards that are put in. Because the rest of that says, the land in question, provided that such modification will not be contrary to the public interest, it's very hard to argue that shortening the process is not detrimental to the public interest in giving the plan appropriate time to be vetted and neighbors appropriate time to comment, particularly when changes are made, either between a preliminary and final or with only one shot at it when it's considered a preliminary and final, and that the purpose and intent of this chapter is observed. Well, by how much it permeates there, it's obvious that's just a total overriding of the intent of the ordinance by how many things are involved in that. Now, specifically for what we have here, it was voted on as a preliminary, and if you look at the preliminary requirement or the preliminary conditions, there's no mention whatsoever in terms of waiving any of the process for the final. Mr. Rice alluded to that, but all you voted on was the preliminary. You talked about, we'd like to vote on it next time, but that was not a vote, that was not binding. And furthermore, in order for that to have happened, there needed to be a waiver request for the entire Planning Commission, Delaware County Planning Commission process for the final plan. Because per the February 8th letter from David Lay, the application submission date was January 26/12. That is the final plan. So nowhere has there been, as the code requires, a request for modification in writing and accompanying part of the application for development. That has not been done, as it was, at least to some extent, on the St. David Shopping Center part. So what I would say is a waiver of this kind really isn't even within your purview, given if you see the power that you have for waivers. Secondly, you shouldn't be granting it because it is just totally subrogating the intent of the ordinance and the time allowed. If you read the part where the entire intent of 12 is there are 3 stages, 255.12a. There are 3 stages in the procedures for the approval of subdivision land development. These stages are necessary to enable the Planning Commission and the Board of Commissioners to have an adequate opportunity to review the submission and to ensure their formal recommendations are reflected in the plans. And it also is for the neighbors. So you're basically taking away the rights of the neighbors as well as the Planning Commission, who, by the way, never saw a waiver for it to waive, as the St. David's Shopping Center did, to waive the final, which is not what's happening here. You're actually waiving the process for the final. They never saw anything like that. It was never listed as a waiver like all the other waivers were. So to be able to claim that this is following the code, even if you were trying to grant this waiver, the waiver process hasn't been filed. And furthermore, I would submit that you don't have the authority to waive it based upon what authority you have to waive Saldo code. Thank you.
Thank you, Baron. Is there any other public comment?
Hi, Barbara Farrell, 19 Llewellyn Court. I just have 2 quick things. One, I remember and correct me if I'm wrong, but I recall being in front of the HARB, asking questions, and the only thing the HARB kept saying to us was we were only allowed to speak about the garage. And that was the part that they talked about, and that we were never allowed to discuss the house. And I know there were times they'd look over and they would say, no, you're not allowed to discuss it. So we never really said anything about the house itself. It was only the garage. And the second thing was, I felt really bad for Allison, who was up here 2 weeks ago, and she was asking questions about the final. Here we are 2 weeks later, and we're still questioning it. I think she had a very fair question when she was saying about seeing a final picture, because we're questioning it tonight. So she really wasn't off in asking that question to see something that was final. Thank you.
Once again, it's Judy Strimmel from 47 Luella Court. I'm just here to notify you that the residents of Luella Court have retained counsel to file an appeal to the zoning board regarding their January 19th impervious interpretation, and the township will receive the appeal shortly. Just here to let you know. I would hope finally that you would table this until all of these questions have been answered, most particularly the enclosing of the porches, the whole issue of impervious versus pervious. Thank you.
Any last public comment?
Uh,
Go ahead.
Could we have just a response from John Rice on the question of our right to waive under SALDO, waive requirements?
Yeah, I mean, under your code and under the MPC, I think you have the right to condense, as you did with St. David's, and grant preliminary final. You have the right to waive any of the subdivision ordinance provisions. It's not like a zoning ordinance that you have to have a standard variance or a hardship. This is a little bit different. If you have a project that's been vetted through the process, and I don't know how many meetings this particular project has been vetted by the Planning Commission, this board, and by HARB, but if you're comfortable at the preliminary final stage, you can condense those and into one particular review, and waive any of the provisions in your SALDO ordinance. It's fairly typical. I know that the way this project started, and the way it was accepted and it was processed through, but you've already, Barron has suggested that this should go back to the Planning Commission. They've already passed upon this as a final plan, because that's the way it was endorsed, that's the way it came through. So, I mean, there's a practical aspect to this too. What would they do at that point? I guess they could review what's happened since preliminary and tonight, which has been very little. Delaware County Planning Commission review letter basically said, not basically, but actually says they're reviewing it as a final plan. And I think that happened because there was some confusion. But the only reason to send this back to the Planning Commission is if there has been substantial changes on this plan. And I don't think nothing has changed, or very little has changed, between your last meeting and tonight. As to the HARB issue, John, if HARB has to review, and I remember the stairs, I don't remember the enclosure, I was at one of the meetings, but if HARB has to review that, then that's a call that Kevin is going to have to make when plans come in, final plans come in. And they're going to have to go back to HARB and deal with whatever HARB decides on that issue. This resolution and the preliminary plan resolution says that the applicant has to comply with all other applicable ordinances, all other state statutes, all other, because you can't put all that into a land development approval, because you have building code provisions and you have HARB provisions, and until they finalize what they want to do, but that call is going to have to be made. If they have to go back, they're going to have to go back. But on the waiver issue, Barron and I disagree on a lot of interpretations in the ordinances. I think you can waive, and I've seen it done many times, on projects, and I know this is a major project for the neighborhood, but on projects that have been fully vetted, unless there's some substantive reason to go through another cycle, there's a practical reason, and that is that they've already approved it. Both planning commissions looked at this as a final plan.
Thank you. Question for Kevin Kachansky. As a normal process, as this plan is submitted, will this plan be subject to the HARB ordinance for further review?
Since I need to take a look at what they're proposing as far as the enclosures and make that determination. If they are enclosing it and that meets the requirements for HARB, then we would make them go back through HARB. I see that as a separate issue from the land development. Any HARB recommendations that come from that board would be in front of you for ultimate approval, which then you can agree or disagree and send them back through that process.
Okay, thank you. I guess I just want to make a brief point that this process really isn't over. This is still the saldo stage, and we still have the development stage. So I think there'll be more opportunity for the HARB to weigh in. Certainly, staff will be involved in this entire process. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Well, before I call the vote, I just want to say one thing. It is very true, what the neighbors have brought up tonight, that this really has not been vetted by HARB. That has been a frustration to me because, as I've said and many times before, to me the most important thing is that this building maintains its integrity on the exterior and that it still looks like basically what it looks like today, despite what's going on the interior and on the parking side of it. But that is not what we have been discussing. That's not what has been in front of us. We have only been looking at the parking and the land development. And there hasn't been any demolition or an addition or reconstruction that would trigger that kind of analysis of what is going on the exterior of the building. And that has been frustrating to me, and I know to many other people. We've tried to kind of sidewise get some assurances by putting some conditions about what the changes will be. I'm very heartened to hear that the applicant is planning to go to HARB for major changes. In my opinion, if you enclose that porch and add on living space and add on, you're drastically changing the exterior, and you must go through HARB. That's what that statute's there to help guide applicants through, to make sure that it complies with what it's supposed to look like. So I plan to see this applicant again in front of HARB when they're making their changes to the exterior of the building. And I'm hopeful that the product that comes out of that process and comes to us will have a certificate of appropriateness because it will be beautiful and compliant with what it should look like. So, having said all that, I'm going to go ahead, unless anyone has any other comment, I'm going to go ahead and call the vote. All in favor say aye. Aye. That's 4 in favor. All opposed say nay.
Nay.
That's 2 opposed. The motion carries.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Library?
Nothing to report.
What's public health?
No report.
Parks and Recreation?
Yeah, Tammy wanted to announce a couple upcoming events, and also I've asked her to talk about the father-daughter dance, the first father-daughter dance.
Thanks, John. I did want to talk a little bit. We had our inaugural daddy-daughter dance in honor of Valentine's Day this past Friday, February 10th, at the Willows Mansion, and it was met with tremendous success. We had 34 daughters and 25 dads that took part in the event. They had dancing, they had arts and crafts where they made a special commemorative clock. They also had a rose ceremony to close off the event where the dads actually gave roses, beautiful pink roses, to the daughters. And those were actually provided due to a sponsorship by the Carol H. Axelrod Memorial Blood Drive. So it really was a tremendous event. We're looking forward to it becoming an annual tradition for many years to come here in Radnor. A couple of other quick announcements that I had. The winter and spring recreation brochure is available and it's up online, as well as the winter township newsletter. We do want to announce that we are currently working on the the spring version of the township newsletter, and there is advertising opportunities that are available to businesses. This is a new venture that we're doing with Hometown Press, so there is a link on the main page of our website for those businesses that do want to participate. This upcoming Sunday, on February 19th at 2:00 p.m., we have a dedication ceremony that's going to take place of the new flagpole and the flags in honor of Emlyn Tennell, who, as you know, has been a famous NFL Hall of Fame inductee. He's also a decorated World War II veteran participating in the U.S. Coast Guard. So that will be in his honor, and I want to thank the tremendous efforts of those with over in the Garrett Hill community for leading in that ceremony in that event.
And Marty Costello.
And Marty Costello. So thank you very much, and we'll hope for good weather. And again, it's at 2:00 p.m. over right at the park. One last announcement. We also have a summer camp open house that's going to take place on Tuesday, March 13th, specifically for Radnor Day Camp and Summer Tot Lot, where folks will be able to register actually almost 2 months early this year. So we're looking forward to a great event. It'll be going on all day, where we're going to welcome people to come in, register early for those 2 popular camps, and also have some extended hours from 6 o'clock to 8:00 p.m. And that concludes my announcements. Thanks.
All right, John? Yeah, I just want to mention, John and I were fortunate enough to be at the Wayne Arts Center. The Expressions of Radnor is artwork done by residents of Radnor Township, and I urge everyone in Radnor to get out there. It's going to run till the March 26th, I think, from 10 to 4, Monday through Saturday. And you'll see a lot of people you know who have done some tremendous work. Jim Corcoran, who works for the township, got an honorable mention. He did a charcoal portrait that's absolutely outstanding. And then in the next room, Chanticleer has brought a lot of the benches that they've decorated and boxes where they give out plant material, plant information and all, and they put that in a great display with great pictures. So there's a great display of the work of the people at Chanticleer, who not only do the plantings but also are very creative in some of the doors and things, and they brought them out there and put them on display. It's just an outstanding place for you to go on a cold day. If you don't have anything else to do, I recommend you go to Wayne Arts Center and take a look at these two, the Chanticleer and the Expressions of Radnor. It was tremendous.
Here,
right.
here.
Next is old business. And the price is right. It doesn't cost anything. The price is right. Old business. Any old business? Any new business? Public participation. Yes, thank you.
I'm Leela Peck, and I live on Lantoga Road, Lantoga Square in Wayne. I don't know, maybe I should be in old business or new business, but this, I hope I'm in the right place. I just wanted to mention that we have heard that there is a new restaurant that is opening up where Chili's was going. And if that's true, we want to be sure that Radnor Township will insist on a stormwater management plan similar to the comprehensive one that Chili's was planning to build. And I believe David Lay showed me, well, explained the plan to me, and it seemed to make sense. So we just would like very much for our children to be able to play on green grass and not the mud that is there right now in the back of our property. So.
Thank you. Our staff will work on that for you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other public comment? Motion to adjourn?
Motion we adjourn.
All those in favor? Aye. Aye. That's 7-0. Thank you all for coming.